Hello and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist. I'm really glad you made it here tonight. Wherever you are on this planet, this little pocket of quiet was made just for you. A calm space where science and wonder can sit side by side, gently putting you to sleep. Tonight, we drift into one of Earth's most dramatic turning points, a moment when an old world disappeared and a strange new one began to rise. 66 million years ago, the world as it had been ended. In a geological instant, 75% of all life vanished. The great predators that had ruled Earth for more than 150 million years, the dinosaurs, were gone forever. What followed was almost unimaginable. Wildfires swept across continents, burning for months without pause. A shroud of ash drifted into the upper atmosphere, dimming the sun until daylight felt like dusk. For years, temperatures fell into unfamiliar lows, then spiked into blistering highs. The food webs that held the world together cracked, then crumbled. And yet, from that broken landscape, life held on. Fragile survivors crept out from burrows and fallen logs. New shoots pushed up through blackened soil. Slowly, the earth began to rebuild itself. Unstable, unpredictable, but alive. For a long time, we assumed mammals rose into those open roles immediately. But the truth is far stranger and far more mysterious. The first great hunters of this new earth weren't mammals at all. At this time, mammals were still small, cautious shadows at the edges of this recovering world. When the old rulers disappeared, their thrones were left empty. And evolution does not leave empty thrones for long. Within a few million years, new hunters emerged, not slowly, but with explosive speed. They came from a lineage far older than the dinosaurs themselves, a lineage that still walks among us, though in shapes far smaller and far less fearsome than the forms that once prowled this recovering earth. They would hunt across newly forming plains and fill roles once held by dinosaurs. But who were these forgotten rulers, and why don't we remember them as we do the dinosaurs? Tonight, we open the pages of that forgotten chapter, a chapter where evolution rewrote its rules and briefly crowned new rulers into the vacuum left behind by the dinosaurs. But before we begin, if you're already enjoying this calm space, it would mean a great deal if you could give this video a like and consider subscribing if you'd like more sleepy science stories like this. And if you feel comfortable sharing, let me know in the comments. Where are you tuning in from tonight, and what time is it there? It's always a joy to see how far across the world these gentle science stories travel. So now, take a slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and together, let's begin the story of the forgotten creature that ruled Earth after the dinosaurs. When the last echoes of the great impact faded, the Earth lay in a quiet that did not feel peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm so fierce that it empties the air itself. In the opening chapter, we drifted through that first moment when the old world collapsed. Now we move gently forward into the long years that followed when the planet tried to steady itself again. The world that remained was unfamiliar. Sunlight reached the ground in thin, faded ribbons. For many seasons, the sky held a veil of ash that wandered from horizon to horizon. Days felt colder than they should, and nights carried a chill that seeped into soil and stone. The great forests that once covered whole continents were scarred and quiet. Many trees stood as blackened pillars, others had fallen, turning the land into a maze of tangled trunks and smoldering remains. Life had survived, but it stepped into this altered landscape with caution. Each dawn arrived with a pale light that seemed uncertain of itself. Winds carried a faint scent of charcoal. Rivers ran dark with silt. Even the air felt heavier, as if it carried memories too heavy to release. Deep within the ground, Roots struggled to rebuild the threads of the food web that had once stretched across the planet. Those threads had been fragile even before the impact, held together by a balance that had existed for millions of years. Now they were broken, and every small creature that ventured out was searching for a world that no longer existed. Plant life returned first, as it often does. Tiny shoots pushed through layers of ash and cold soil, reaching for light that was dim but steady enough to nurture them. Their presence softened the land a little. Patches of green appeared like quiet promises, scattered across the continents. They fed insects and small grazing animals, which in turn allowed the first small predators to survive. Birds, which had already begun to spread into new shapes before the world changed, fluttered through this recovering wilderness. Their bodies were small, their movements swift, their calls thin and sharp in the strange silence. They searched for seeds or insects beneath fallen logs. Some nested in the hollow spaces left by shattered trees. Others moved constantly, never staying long enough in one place to risk danger. Mammals were present too, but they lived careful lives. They were small, warm bodies curled in burrows or crevices, emerging only when the air felt safe enough. They fed on seeds, insects, and whatever scraps the unstable environment offered. Their world was filled with uncertainty. They had survived the disaster, but they were not ready to rise. The earth was still too unstable, its dangers too unpredictable. Reptiles, which had always been patient survivors, moved more slowly through the changing terrain. Some lived near the water, carrying on the old rhythms of their ancestors. Others searched for warmth where the sun touched the ground, reclaiming little pieces of territory even as the climate shifted beneath them. They had not vanished with the dinosaurs, and their endurance would shape the millions of years that followed. In those early years, there was no single ruler of the land. The world was in flux, and every creature that stepped into the open air had to find its place in the new order. Predators and prey were scattered among unfamiliar landscapes. Forests grew in patterns that did not match the old world. Grasslands appeared where none had existed before. Mountains that had once been backgrounds to dinosaur dominion now stood like silent witnesses to a different age beginning. With the great hunters gone, the world felt strangely open. The absence of giant predators left spaces in the ecosystem that no creature had yet learned to fill. These spaces were like empty rooms waiting for someone to move in. Nature does not leave such rooms empty for long. The roles once held by tyrannosaurs, raptors, and other powerful carnivores were now vacant. Those empty roles carried opportunity, even if the creatures alive at the time did not understand it. As the climate shifted, cooling for years then warming again, the Earth created a moving stage for evolution. Food webs stretched, snapped, and rewove themselves in new shapes. Small mammals ventured farther from safety. Birds experimented with new habitats. Reptiles tested the edges of the recovering world. Each creature took risks simply by searching for food or shelter, and every small survival opened the possibility for something larger in the future. The instability of this age shaped everything that came after. When old rulers vanish, the rules that bind the natural world loosen. In that loosened world, even a small shift in behavior or anatomy can lead to a new path. Some creatures would branch into unfamiliar forms, others would rise to fill roles far larger than their size suggested. The world was broken, but it was also wide open. In this fragile, recovering earth, the stage was set for something unexpected. Not a return of the giants that had vanished, but a rise of creatures that would reinvent what it meant to be a land predator. Creatures with ancient roots and new ambitions. Creatures that would step into the empty thrones left behind and change the story of the early Cenozoic in ways few could have imagined. As the earth began settling into its slow recovery, New shapes moved quietly beneath the growing canopy of plants. Some were small and cautious, others were bold enough to test the open ground. Among these wanderers were creatures whose ancestry reached far deeper into time than the world around them suggested. They belonged to a lineage that had endured shifting climates, ancient floods, drifting continents, and the rise and fall of entire worlds. This lineage would come to play a surprising role in the story unfolding after the Great Extinction. These creatures were the Crocodylomorphs, a broad family that included every form of crocodile relative the Earth has ever known. When we think of crocodiles today, we often picture heavy bodies sliding into rivers, eyes just above the water, still and patient. Modern crocodilians feel like the last echoes of a primeval age. Yet this quiet image tells only a tiny fraction of their story. The deeper history of their family tree stretches back to a time long before the first dinosaurs took their place on the land. Ancient crocodilomorphs were already experimenting with shapes and lifestyles, while early reptiles were still learning how to move across the Triassic world. Their story is not a single line of descent, it is a branching river, wide and varied, flowing through more than 200 million years. Some branches led to creatures that looked almost nothing like the crocodiles we know. They were slender, long-legged animals that sprinted across dry ground. Others lived like small hunters in the undergrowth. Some returned to the water, some stayed on land. A few even explored the skies and oceans in forms that seem almost unbelievable when compared to the slow, armored reptiles of today. By the time the age of dinosaurs began, crocodilomorphs had already built a long legacy of adaptation. They survived volcanic winters, shifting sea levels, and continents that rearranged themselves like drifting rafts. When the world changed, they changed with it, sometimes slowly, sometimes with unexpected speed. Because modern crocodilians are only a single surviving branch of this vast lineage, it can be easy to overlook the diversity that shaped their past. The crocodiles we see today are specialists of the water. Their bodies are built for slipping through rivers with quiet power. Their tails work like oars, their senses are tuned to stillness, waiting, and sudden bursts of force. Their bones are dense, helping them stay submerged. Their snouts are flattened for gripping prey that passes close to the surface. But long ago, in the ages that followed the Great Extinction, many of their relatives did not live in rivers at all. Some walked on land with long legs placed directly beneath their bodies. Their gait was not the low, sweeping crawl we associate with modern crocodiles. It was an upright stride, almost like the movement of a wolf or a large cat. Their bodies were built for speed and control. Their tails helped them balance rather than push through water. Their jaws were shaped not for dragging prey beneath the surface, but for slicing through flesh during fast hunts. These ancient relatives were not simply crocodiles in different landscapes. They were animals that had taken a different path entirely, shaped by an evolutionary history that allowed for remarkable experimentation. The world that rose after the dinosaurs needed new kinds of hunters, and this family had the flexibility to step into roles that had once belonged to giants. For a long time, scientists believed crocodile evolution had been slow and steady, changing little over millions of years. The modern forms seemed so ancient that it was easy to imagine their past as a straight line. That idea changed when paleontologists began to uncover fossils that told a different story. Skulls with narrow blade-like teeth, limb bones that hinted at upright movement, armor that was lighter than expected. Each discovery revealed another piece of a lineage that had been far more adventurous than anyone had imagined. In some layers of ancient rock, researchers found traces of croc relatives that hunted on open plains. In others, they discovered species that lived in forests or near the edges of lakes that no longer exist. Each fossil added to a picture that grew more complex with every find, showing that crocodile evolution had unfolded across a wide tapestry of environments. The diversity of crocodylomorphs is a reminder that evolution is not limited to single paths. Even creatures known today for their slow, river-bound lifestyles once explored possibilities that feel almost surprising. The world after the Great Extinction was filled with uncertainty, yet this ancient lineage had survived countless upheavals before. When the opportunity arose, they stepped into the open roles with the quiet confidence of a family that had weathered many storms. As we continue through this forgotten age, these land-running crocodile relatives will reveal just how adaptable their lineage truly was. Their story is not only about survival, it is about reinvention and the hidden power of a family whose past reaches far deeper than the rivers we know today. As the early Cenozoic world reshaped itself, many of the creatures that stepped into the new light were survivors of older ages. Among them were the distant ancestors of modern crocodiles. They had lived through the same violent moments that had swept away the great land rulers, yet they emerged from the darkness with a quiet endurance that continues to puzzle and inspire scientists today. To understand how they made it through, we must drift back into those first uncertain years after the impact. The earth was colder then, the skies carried a dim glow. Rivers and coastal wetlands moved silently beneath thick layers of ash that settled on the water like slow falling snow. In places where trees had fallen, tangled roots submerged into muddy banks. Yet within these still waters and shadowed edges, life continued. Ancient crocodilian relatives already had a long history of adapting to change. They had survived earlier warming events, long droughts, and sudden shifts in sea level. Their lineage had learned how to be patient. They had learned how to make the most of difficult times. This patience, woven deep into their biology, played a quiet role in helping them endure the collapse that followed the asteroid. One of the most important advantages they carried into this uncertain world was their connection to water. While the land was filled with burning forests and falling temperatures, rivers and wetlands remained more stable than the terrain above. Water absorbed heat slowly, creating pockets of warmth even when the air cooled sharply. Along muddy banks, ancient crocs could sink beneath the surface, letting the water cradle their bodies while the world above shifted wildly. Their semi-aquatic habits gave them refuge at a time when survival depended on finding shelter. Their bodies also worked in a way that required less constant energy than many other creatures. Unlike warm-blooded animals that needed steady sources of food to maintain their internal heat, ancient croc relatives could slow their metabolisms when resources were scarce. They could wait. They could remain still for long periods, moving only when something drifted close enough to eat. In a world where food chains were shattered and nearby prey was unpredictable, this ability to conserve energy was a powerful advantage. There are hints that some ancient croc species relied on burrows during the harshest moments. Burrowing had long been a survival strategy for many reptile families, allowing them to escape extreme heat or cold by moving into the earth where temperatures changed more slowly. Sheltered beneath layers of soil and sediment, they could avoid choking ash and rapid temperature swings. These hidden pockets of warmth and protection would have offered safety not only during the immediate aftermath of the impact, but also during the long months that followed, when the climate swung between cold and warmth in unpredictable rhythms. The fossil record gives us glimpses of this resilience. In layers of rock formed just after the extinction, paleontologists have discovered fossilized bones that resemble those of modern crocodilians. These remains appear in regions where many other creatures did not survive, suggesting that croc relatives were able to hold on even when local ecosystems were deeply disrupted. Their presence in these deposits acts as a quiet signature, a reminder that they did not vanish with the old world, but waited in its shadow until conditions improved. Some fossils show growth patterns that reflect periods of slow development, as if the animals experienced long stretches of limited resources. Others show that young crocs continued to hatch even during the difficult years, which tells us that they did more than survive. They continued their life cycles. This means that while many species struggled simply to persist, crocodilian ancestors were able to maintain enough stability to raise new generations. Their survival was not the result of a single trait. It was a combination of habits and biology, shaped over millions of years. Their ability to live between land and water gave them choices. Their energy-efficient bodies allowed them to withstand long periods without food. Their reliance on burrows and sheltered environments offered refuge when the air filled with ash or when temperatures climbed too high. Each of these traits helped them navigate a world in turmoil. Another quiet strength was their adaptability. Although they are often seen as unchanged relics from an ancient world, this view does not capture the full complexity of their history. The ancestors of modern crocs had already proven themselves capable of evolving into a wide range of forms. Some were small and agile, moving along riverbanks in search of fish or insects. Others grew larger, waiting in the shallows for passing prey. This variety meant that some forms were better suited than others to survive the years after the impact. The flexibility of their lineage increased their chances of finding places where life could continue. As time passed and the skies cleared, ancient croc relatives quietly reclaimed their spaces in rivers, lakes, and coastal environments. They did not rise to dominate the land, but they endured, spreading slowly into habitats that offered safety. Their story during these years is not one of dramatic battles or sweeping conquests. It is a story of quiet persistence, shaped by patient bodies that could outlast the chaos. Their endurance created a bridge between the ancient world and the one that unfolded after the extinction. While many creatures vanished, these survivors carried with them the deep history of their lineage. They waited in the silence of recovering waters while new ecosystems began to form. Their resilience would set the stage for the evolution of unexpected descendants, some of which would eventually step onto land with long legs and unfamiliar ambitions. For now, in the stillness of this early Cenozoic world, the ancient crocs remained close to the water, breathing slowly beneath the surface, watching as new shapes appeared on the land above them. Their quiet survival would help shape the story of the forgotten hunters yet to come. As the early Cenozoic world continued to heal, the land slowly opened itself to new possibilities. Forests thickened, rivers settled into calmer courses, and small mammals scurried through the undergrowth in growing numbers. Birds tested the skies above wider clearings. Reptiles explored the edges of newly forming plains. The world had not fully steadied, but it was learning to breathe again. Within this changing landscape, a lineage of crocodylomorphs began to explore a path that would reshape their place in Earth's story. Until now, their ancestors had survived by relying on the stability of water and the patience of bodies that needed little to endure. But the centuries after the extinction brought new opportunities. The land was open. Apex predator roles stood empty. Creatures were spreading into spaces with few natural threats. Some members of the croc family stepped quietly out of the water and onto dry ground. Over countless generations, their bodies changed in ways that would have seemed impossible if we looked only at the slow-moving crocodiles of today. Their limbs grew longer, their posture shifted, their teeth sharpened into tools meant for slicing rather than gripping. These were the early Sebecids, the land-running crocodile relatives that would become some of the most formidable hunters of the Paleocene and Eocene. The name that often comes to mind first is Sebecus. It lived in what is now South America during a time when that continent existed in almost complete isolation. This isolation created a world with its own rhythm. Animals there evolved without the influence of larger predators from the northern continents. The land was warm and lush. Forests spread across wide valleys. River systems braided themselves through low plains. In this environment, the Sebecids stepped into a role no one would have expected for a crocodile relative. Unlike their semi-aquatic ancestors, these creatures moved with an upright gait. Their legs were placed beneath their bodies, not splayed out to the sides. This simple shift changed everything. It allowed them to walk with balance and speed. They could travel across rough ground, weave through dense vegetation, and chase prey that lived far from the safety of rivers. Their bodies were lean compared to modern crocodiles. Their snouts were deeper and more robust. Their eyes faced forward, suggesting a focus suited for hunting on land rather than wading in water. Sebecids itself was not the largest of its kind, but it set the pattern for what this lineage could become. It likely stalked the forests and open woodlands of Paleocene South America, moving through the shade with the confidence of a predator that no longer needed the stillness of water to hide itself. Fossils show teeth shaped like narrow blades, serrated along the edges, perfect for slicing through flesh. These were not the tools of an ambush hunter expecting to drag prey underwater. They were the tools of a land predator capable of delivering swift, decisive bites. What makes the Sebecids so extraordinary is not only their anatomy, but the evolutionary story they represent. Crocodile relatives had spent millions of years perfecting life along the edges of rivers and lakes. Their bodies were shaped for stealth, patience, and sudden bursts of power in the water. For this lineage to move onto land and become active hunters required a dramatic shift in lifestyle. It was as if they walked away from the identity their ancestors had carried for countless generations and embraced an entirely different one. South America at the time offered an ideal stage for such an experiment. With the great dinosaurs gone and the early mammals still small and cautious, the continent provided open territory for predators willing to claim it. The Sebecids were bold enough to do so. They filled the roles once held by swift theropods, though their bodies came from a lineage far older. They did not imitate the dinosaurs. They carved out their own style of predation, shaped by the long history of their reptilian heritage and the new challenges of a recovering world. Other members of this group appeared across South America through the Paleocene and Eocene. Some grew larger, others developed even more pronounced slicing teeth. A few may have pursued prey across open clearings, relying on speed. Others preferred denser forests, where stealth mattered more than outright chase. This variety shows that the Sebecids were not a single experiment. They were a rising branch of the Crocodylomorph family, exploring many shapes and behaviors as they adapted to the dynamic landscapes around them. Their existence is a quiet reminder that evolution rarely moves in simple lines. It branches, bends, and occasionally circles back on itself, creating forms that feel both familiar and entirely new. The Sebecids embodied this principle. They took the ancient foundation of their lineage and reimagined it as something agile and terrestrial. Their rise marks one of the most dramatic transformations in crocodile evolution, a moment when the family stepped far beyond the water and onto the dry ground of the predator's throne. As the forests of early South America continued to stretch beneath warm sunlight, these land-running crocs walked confidently among the shadows, shaping a chapter of Earth's story that would be forgotten for millions of years, hidden beneath layers of stone until their bones were rediscovered and their lives pieced together once more. As we continue drifting through the early Cenozoic world, the forests and plains of South America reveal shapes that feel both familiar and deeply strange. Among the shadows and soft light, something moves with a rhythm that does not belong to the water-bound crocodiles we know today. To understand the Sebecids fully, we must look closely at the bodies they carried across this recovering land, because every part of their anatomy tells a story of transformation. Their ancestors had spent millions of years lying low in riverbanks and slow-moving waters. These earlier creatures lived with heavy bellies pressed against the ground, limbs wide and sweeping, and bodies shaped for slipping beneath the surface. But the land-running crocodile relatives that rose in the Paleocene and Eocene had abandoned many of these traits. In their place, they carried something new, something that allowed them to move across forests and open plains with surprising agility. Their legs were the most striking. Change. Instead of sticking out to the sides like the limbs of modern crocodiles, the legs of a Sebecid extended downward, placed beneath the body like pillars. This erect posture created a sense of height and balance that feels almost impossible when compared to the slow, low bodies of the crocodiles we see today. Their hips were shaped to allow a forward stride rather than a sideways sprawl. Their ankles worked like hinges built for speed, allowing them to push off the ground with strength and precision. Walking on these long, upright legs, a Sebecid would have moved with a smooth, confident rhythm. Instead of dragging its belly or sweeping its tail behind it, it stood above the ground, supported by limbs that redistributed its weight. This difference allowed it to climb small slopes, weave between trees, and travel long distances without tiring quickly. The land was no obstacle. It was a wide path waiting to be explored. Because their posture lifted them higher, their heads sat at a level that changed how they saw the world. Their eyes, positioned toward the front of the skull, created a field of vision that helped them judge distance and movement. Modern crocodiles rely heavily on the stillness of water and sudden bursts of force. Sebecids needed something different. They needed the ability to track moving prey across uneven ground. Depth perception became a quiet but essential tool. The shape of their skulls mirrored this shift. Rather than the long, flat snout of a river ambush hunter, their jaws were deeper, more robust, and built for power. The teeth that lined those jaws were shaped like slender blades, each edge serrated with tiny ridges. These ridges worked the way a fine knife might, slicing cleanly through flesh instead of clamping and dragging. A bite from a Sebecid was not meant to hold, it was meant to cut. One swift strike could remove a piece of flesh large enough to weaken prey, allowing the chase to continue until the animal tired or fell. Inside the skull, the attachment points for jaw muscles reveal a predator that relied on quick, decisive bites rather than the crushing force that modern crocodiles are famous for. The muscles that powered the jaws of a Sebecid were arranged to snap the mouth shut with speed. Imagine an animal darting from the shadows, jaws flashing in a quick arc, leaving a deep wound that bled freely. This was the style of a land hunter that depended on pursuit and repeated strikes, not the still patience of an underwater ambush. These behaviors give us a natural point of comparison. When scientists examine Sebecid anatomy, they often find themselves thinking of wolves and big cats. Not because these animals are related, but because they share certain physical strategies. Wolves rely on long legs, endurance, and coordinated movement to chase down prey. Big cats rely on precision, powerful forelimbs, and a sudden rush of force at just the right moment. The Sebecids existed somewhere between those ideas. Their bodies were not built for pack behavior like wolves, nor for the pouncing strength of large cats, but their upright stance and slicing bite placed them in a role far closer to these mammals than to any crocodile alive today. Imagine one moving through a dense Paleocene forest. Its head shifts gently as it listens for the soft rustle of a small mammal or the cautious movement of a distant ground bird. It places each foot carefully, testing the ground for sound. When the moment comes, it does not leap suddenly like a tiger or erupt with raw speed like a cheetah. Instead, it follows with steady, persistent confidence, closing the distance with long strides, waiting for the right moment to strike with its blade-edged teeth. They did not need the weight of the water to power their hunting style. Their bodies were shaped for the dry ground, for the chase, and for the cut. Even their tails supported this change. While still muscular, these tails were shaped more for balance than for swimming. When a Sebecid ran, its tail followed the movement of its spine, helping keep its center of gravity steady as it accelerated. All of these features combined into something the world had never seen before. A crocodile relative that walked like a hunter, saw like a hunter, and bit like a hunter. Not a creature of rivers and swamps, but an animal built for forests, plains, and the unpredictable life that flourished in the wake of the extinction. As time passed, these land-running predators settled into the rhythms of South America's warm landscapes, carrying their ancient lineage into a new age, shaped by bodies that felt entirely new, yet rooted in a history that stretched back millions of years. As we continue drifting through the warm, recovering landscapes of the early Cenozoic, the Sebecids stand before us not only as unusual crocodile relatives, but as animals shaped by a remarkable and carefully tuned set of tools. Their bodies carried them across the ground with confidence, but it was their jaws, teeth, and skulls that completed the picture of a true land predator. To understand them fully, we must look gently and closely at the architecture of their bite. When scientists first studied the skulls of Sebecids like Sebecus, they were struck by something unexpected. These were not the wide, flat jaws of a creature wading in murky water. These were deep and powerful structures, curved slightly at the snout and packed with teeth that resembled something closer to knives than to the conical pegs we see in modern crocodiles. Each tooth held along its edge a line of tiny ridges, almost like the serrations on a careful carving blade. Under magnification, they showed a repeating pattern of bumps and grooves, each one designed to catch and slice through flesh. These serrations gave the teeth a special function. Instead of gripping and holding prey underwater, the teeth could shear through muscle and skin with surprising efficiency. When the jaw snapped shut, the serrated edges acted like dozens of miniature saws, tearing cleanly through tissue. This style of biting worked well during a chase, allowing the predator to strike quickly, injure its prey, and retreat to safer distance if needed. In a world where prey could run and twist through trees, a tool that delivered deep wounds in an instant was invaluable. The bite itself was not designed for crushing thick shells or heavy bones. Instead, it excelled at slicing. This difference reveals an important clue about the Sebecids' hunting strategy. They did not behave like river ambush hunters. They were designed to take advantage of movement, striking at the soft parts of their prey, letting bleeding and fatigue weaken the animal over time. The strength behind those slicing teeth came from the arrangement of muscles and bones within the skull. When paleontologists study fossil skulls, they look carefully at the spaces where muscles once attached. These areas tell a quiet story about how the jaw moved, how much force it could create, and what kinds of prey the animal could handle. In Sebecids, the attachment sites reveal muscles shaped for speed, especially in the closing motion of the jaws. Modern crocodiles generate tremendous force when they clamp down, but their jaws open slowly, designed for a final crushing grip rather than repeated slashes. Sebecids were different. Their skulls show that the muscles used to close the mouth had a strong, quick contraction, perfect for fast strikes. The muscles for opening the mouth were lighter, but this difference suggests that the predator did not need a wide, dramatic opening. It needed a rapid, controlled bite that could be delivered again and again during pursuit. Estimating bite force in extinct animals is always a gentle balance of science and inference. Researchers use the size of the skull, the placement of muscle attachments, and comparisons with living relatives to create a picture of what these creatures could do. In the case of Sebecids, the estimated bite forces were strong but not overwhelming. They were powerful enough to tear into flesh, yet not so strong that they could crush large bones. This again points to a predator that relied on slicing efficiency rather than raw pressure. The shape of the skull supported this approach. In profile, the snout of a Sebecid was tall and slightly curved. This height allowed more space for strong jaw muscles. The back of the skull flared gently, creating a stable platform for muscle attachment and giving extra strength to the bite. Even the arrangement of the jaw joints mattered. They were positioned to allow quick closing movements while keeping the teeth aligned during each strike. When combined, these features created a predator that operated differently from almost any crocodile alive today. Instead of lying in wait, it likely moved through the forest with a slower, stealthy confidence, tracking the sound of rustling leaves or the faint scent of a small mammal. When the moment came, it would dart forward and deliver a sharp, slicing bite. Blood loss and fatigue would gradually weaken the prey. A second strike might follow, then a third. Each wound would deepen the advantage. Wolves and big cats use their jaws differently, yet the comparison still helps illuminate the Sebecid's place in this world. Wolves rely on endurance and coordinated bites. Big cats aim for powerful, suffocating holds. Sebecids claimed their own style. Their jaws were built for repeated cutting, supported by strong neck muscles that pulled backward as the teeth cut forward. This motion created a kind of tearing effect, a method that required precision rather than sheer power. The skull mechanics also hint at how they processed food once the hunt was over. Instead of swallowing large chunks whole, these predators likely ripped smaller strips of flesh free, each cut aided by the sharp serrations. The tissues of their prey would have yielded easily under these blades. Bones may have been avoided, not because they lacked strength, but because their bodies did not require the extra force needed to break them. Everything about their bite points to a creature built for dry ground, a creature that needed to move quickly, strike quickly, and retreat quickly. A creature that lived by balance, timing, and the careful sharpness of its teeth. In the warm forests of the early Cenozoic, this bite became one of the defining traits that allowed Sebecids to take their place as true land predators, blending the deep history of their lineage with a new way of living on the freshly recovering Earth. As the early Cenozoic unfolded, the landscapes of South America stretched beneath warm skies, quiet and self-contained. It was a continent set adrift from the rest of the world, separated by wide oceans and deep expanses of water that kept other land animals from crossing for millions of years. This isolation shaped its ecosystems in ways that feel almost dreamlike when we compare them to the worlds forming far to the north. Here, life followed its own rhythms, unhurried by outside influences, and the stage was set for predators unlike any others on Earth. Imagine South America during the Paleocene and Eocene. Forests rose like layered curtains, filled with broad leaves that captured the humid air. Ferns spread across the forest floor, their fronds catching droplets that drifted down through the canopy. The air held the scent of wet soil and flowering plants, warmed by sunlight that filtered gently through the green above. Rivers braided through valleys, cutting slow paths that fed lakes and marshlands. Open clearings appeared where trees thinned, creating gentle transitions between forest and grassy edges. These habitats were not empty. Small mammals scurried through fallen leaves, their delicate paws barely disturbing the quiet. Birds with long legs and curious beaks picked through the undergrowth. Insects, newly flourishing after the chaos that had swept the world, hummed beneath the trees. Reptiles lay stretched across sunlit branches, warming themselves before slipping back into shade. The land was peaceful in appearance, Yet beneath this calm surface, powerful evolutionary shifts were beginning to ripple outward. Isolation is a sculptor of life. When a continent stands alone for long periods, the creatures within it respond only to the pressures of their immediate environment. Without new predators arriving from distant lands or new competitors crossing from other continents, each lineage grows into shapes that reflect the world around them rather than the larger trends of the planet. In South America, this solitude allowed ancient crocodylomorphs to explore paths they might never have taken if northern predators had been present. In other parts of the world, early carnivorous mammals were beginning to rise, but here their cousins remained small and wary, shaped by different pressures. The roles that might have been filled by wolves or large cats in a connected world remained open. There was space for something new, something unexpected, something that walked on long, sturdy legs and carried the ancient bloodline of crocodiles into a new age. The Sebecids emerged into this quiet isolation with a confidence built from opportunity. They moved through dense vegetation and open savannas with the ease of animals that had no true equals nearby. Their bodies were shaped for land. Their senses were tuned to movement in the brush. Their hunting strategies mirrored the needs of this landscape. They rose not because they overpowered other predators, but because the ecological room was there, waiting to be filled. Yet South America was not without its own competition. The mammals that lived there were evolving along their own winding paths. Many of them were unique to the continent, shaped by the same isolation that allowed the Sebecids to flourish. Some were early ungulates, small and agile, with long faces and light hooves that carried them across the soft ground. They grazed on tender shoots or foraged for fallen fruits. Others were early relatives of the animals that would one day become sloths and armadillos. These creatures moved slowly through the trees or dug into the earth, their bodies already showing hints of the forms they would one day take. There were also strange groups of mammals that have no close relatives alive today. Some carried powerful limbs and stocky bodies, built for strength rather than speed. Others resembled small predators, nibbling on insects or scavenging from the kills of larger animals. None of them were large enough to dominate the landscape. None of them filled the role of an apex hunter. Their presence shaped the ecosystem, but they did not command it. The Sebecids stepped into this mosaic with a style that blended ancient resilience and new ambition. Their long strides carried them across varied terrain. They hunted the mammals that moved through the shadows, the birds that nested on the ground, and perhaps even the reptiles that warmed themselves in clearings. Every part of the environment played a role in their rise, from the warm air that kept their cold-blooded bodies active to the dense forests that offered cover during a hunt. As time passed, the ecosystems of South America continued to evolve in ways that felt almost dreamlike compared to the rest of the world. New plant species appeared, trees grew taller, rivers shifted, carving new valleys and leaving old channels dry. Each change shaped the lives of the creatures that lived there, and each shift opened new opportunities for predators and prey. What makes this continent so fascinating during the Paleocene and Eocene is not only the creatures that lived there, but the quiet, patient way in which isolation guided their evolution. Every animal, from the smallest rodent-sized mammal to the graceful Sebecid hunters, played a role in creating a world that felt complete within itself. In these ancient forests and plains, life followed its own patterns, untouched by the great migrations unfolding elsewhere. The Sebecids thrived in this secluded realm, their bodies and behaviors shaped by landscapes that had been separated from other continents for longer than any living creature could remember. Their story is woven tightly into the land itself, a reflection of a world made unique by solitude and the slow, steady rhythm of deep time. As we wander deeper into the story of these land-running crocodile relatives, the path begins to shift from ancient forests and quiet plains to another kind of landscape. This one is made of stone, dust, and the patient hands of scientists. For a long time, the idea of crocodiles living as swift hunters on land seemed almost impossible. Their modern relatives offered no clues. Nothing in the living world suggested that such creatures had ever existed. The truth remained hidden until paleontologists uncovered the bones that would change our understanding of this ancient lineage forever. The discovery that opened the door to this forgotten chapter came from South America during the early 20th century. In the layers of rock shaped by long-vanished rivers and ancient mudflows, fossil hunters uncovered fragments of a skull unlike anything they had seen. These remains belonged to an animal later named Sebecus icaorhinus, a creature whose bones carried the signature of both familiarity and strangeness. At first glance, the skull resembled that of a crocodile. It held the same general outline, the same heavy strength, but the details told a different story. The jaws of Sebecus icaorhinus curved gently downward, giving the snout a deep and almost predatory shape. When scientists examined the teeth, they paused. Each tooth was tall and narrow, with tiny ridges running along its edges. These serrations looked more like the teeth of certain carnivorous dinosaurs than any crocodile known to science. Instead of being smooth and round for gripping, these teeth were built to slice through flesh. Paleontologists studying the skull noticed other unusual features. The eye sockets were positioned in a way that suggested forward-facing vision, helping the animal judge distances on land rather than watching for movement above water. The back of the skull flared into wide surfaces where powerful jaw muscles would have attached. These features painted a picture of a predator that struck swiftly and precisely, not one that waited in murky water for prey to wander near. As more pieces were uncovered, the full outline of this creature became clearer. The skull was narrower than those of modern crocodiles but deeper, giving it a strong bite while remaining lightweight enough for fast movement. The palate, the roofs of the mouth, and the arrangement of the teeth all hinted at a lifestyle far removed from riverbanks. The animal that carried this skull likely hunted across dry ground, relying on vision and speed rather than ambush. These early studies were met with curiosity and sometimes disbelief. Many researchers struggled to imagine a crocodile relative that behaved so differently from what they knew. At the time, scientists relied heavily on comparisons with living animals, and nothing alive resembled the predator reconstructed from these fossils. It took decades of patient work and more discoveries before the idea of land-running crocs became widely accepted. As paleontologists continued to explore the fossil-rich regions of South America, they uncovered additional skulls and partial skeletons belonging to close relatives of Sebecus. Each new specimen carried the same peculiar features: tall, serrated teeth, deep and narrow snouts, forward-oriented eyes, limb bones that were built to hold the body high off the ground. These repeated patterns confirmed that Sebecus icaorhinus was not an isolated oddity. It was part of a whole family of land predators that had once ruled parts of the continent. The effort to understand these bones gained new momentum when modern technologies became available. Computed tomography scans allowed scientists to peer inside the fossilized skulls without damaging them. These scans revealed the thickness of bone walls, the shape of brain cavities, and even the pathways where nerves once flowed. Muscle reconstructions became more accurate. Researchers could calculate bite forces with greater precision, compare jaw strength to modern species, and simulate how the teeth moved during feeding. Three-dimensional models made from digital scans allowed paleontologists to test how these animals opened and closed their jaws. They could see exactly how the teeth met and how the skull absorbed the force of each bite. These models showed that the Sebecids used a slicing motion combined with a quick snap, giving their bites a deep cutting action. The jaws did not need the crushing force of a river ambush hunter. Instead, they behaved like sharpened blades powered by swift, efficient muscles. Modern techniques also helped reclassify these ancient croc relatives. For many years, they were placed loosely within the crocodilian family tree, treated as unusual outliers. But once researchers combined fossil evidence with genetic studies of living crocodiles, the picture became clearer. The Sebecids represented a distinct branch of the Crocodylomorph lineage. They were not simply crocodiles that adapted slightly to land. They were the descendants of an ancient split, living out an evolutionary experiment that unfolded separately from the familiar crocodiles we see today. New discoveries continue to shape our understanding. Each fossil offers another piece of the story, another hint at how these animals lived, hunted, and evolved. The stones of South America hold many secrets, and among them are the bones that revealed an entire world we had nearly forgotten. These fossils, patient and silent, remind us that evolution often takes paths that disappear completely unless someone takes the time to look closely. In the quiet of this fossil-rich wilderness, the bones of ancient predators wait beneath layers of time, carrying memories of forests long vanished and landscapes touched by creatures that once reshaped the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. As we continue wandering through the warm Cenozoic world that followed the Great Extinction, the forests and plains of South America begin to open into wider landscapes. The air is thick with the scent of flowering plants, and the rivers move slowly under bright sun. Among the creatures that roam these lands, one rises above the others, not only in size but in presence. It is a predator shaped by deep time, an heir to an ancient lineage that had already weathered the planet's greatest storms. Its name, discovered long after its bones turned to stone, is Barinasuchus. To imagine this creature is to imagine a land hunter of astonishing scale. While many Sebecids were modest in size, Barinasuchus carried its lineage to an extreme. Scientists estimate that it reached lengths comparable to some of the largest predatory dinosaurs of earlier ages. Its body stretched across the ground in a way that feels almost surreal for an animal that descended from crocodile ancestors. Some reconstructions place it at more than 6 meters long, with a skull that could measure more than a meter by itself. The details shift with each new fossil, yet the overall picture remains clear. Barinasuchus was enormous. Its size alone sets it apart from most predators of its time, but its shape is what makes it truly remarkable. This was not a low-slung creature lurking in the margins of rivers. Its legs were long and held upright beneath the body. Each step lifted its frame high above the ground, giving it the posture of a runner rather than a sprawler. Its muscles were arranged along the limbs and spine to support this weight without slowing it down, and its tail followed in a steady line that helped keep its movements balanced. Barinasuchus lived during the Miocene, a time far removed from the early Paleocene forests we explored earlier. South America was still largely isolated, but its ecosystems had matured into rich tapestries of grasslands, wetlands, and scattered woodlands. The world was warmer. The air shimmered above open plains. Herds of grazing mammals spread across the land, many of them unlike anything living today. Ground sloths, early camel-like herbivores, and large rodent relatives traveled in loose groups, searching for food and water. These were not fragile creatures, yet they would have felt the presence of Barinasuchus in the edges of their awareness, the same way animals today sense when a large predator is near. The jaws of Barinasuchus held the same slicing teeth that defined its smaller Sebecid relatives, only on a much grander scale. Tall, serrated blades lined the edges of its mouth, turning each bite into a deep cut. Its skull was tall and narrow, designed to deliver such strikes with precision. Muscles anchored to the back of the skull allowed it to snap its jaws shut quickly, creating wounds that bled freely. Unlike modern crocodiles, with crushing bites built for dragging prey underwater, Barinasuchus used its jaws to take swift, damaging cuts during a chase. This predator likely moved through its environment with a blend of patience and confidence. In the cover of sparse forest or tall grasses, it could wait for a herd animal to step just close enough, or it could follow from a distance, using its height to see through vegetation. When the opportunity came, it would rush forward in powerful strides, covering ground faster than most herbivores could anticipate. A single bite, delivered to the flank or leg, could weaken even a large prey animal. A second or third strike would finish the work. Barinasuchus did not need to overpower its prey with one overwhelming attack. Its body suggested endurance, strategy, and deliberate force. The combination of speed, slicing teeth, and sheer mass made it one of the top predators anywhere in the world at that time. In an era when large mammalian carnivores had not yet spread into South America, Barinasuchus stood nearly alone in size and capability. Its dominance was supported not only by its physical traits but by the solitude of its environment. South America's long isolation created ecosystems where ancient lineages survived and flourished in ways impossible elsewhere. Predators like giant terror birds ruled some habitats, yet even these towering birds would have been wary of an animal like Barinasuchus. Its strength and power placed it at the top of the food web, a position seldom shared. The world it lived in was full of movement and sound. Herds brushed against shrubs as they passed. Birds called across lakes. In the stillness of dawn or dusk, Barinasuchus may have moved quietly through the grass, its heavy frame softened by the rhythm of its step. Every part of its anatomy, from the posture of its legs to the deep curve of its jaw, reflected a creature adapted not for water but for land, a crocodile relative that had embraced a new way of life entirely. Among all the land-running crocs that once roamed South America, Barinasuchus stands, tallest in memory. Its bones remind us that evolution often reaches across boundaries we assume are fixed. In the sunlit plains of the Miocene, this ancient predator walked with the presence of a giant, carrying the heritage of its lineage into a form that no one would expect from a crocodilian today. In this quiet, wandering age of mammal-rich landscapes, Barinasuchus reigned with a confidence shaped by millions of years, a titan of a forgotten world where crocodile kin ruled the land once more. As the quiet story of the Sebecids unfolds, their bodies and skulls reveal much about how they lived, yet it is their behavior that brings them fully into the light. To imagine these ancient predators moving through the warm forests and open clearings of South America is to imagine a way of hunting unlike anything carried by their modern crocodile cousins. Their world was shaped by sound, scent, and movement, and their strategies reflected a deep understanding of the land beneath their feet. In earlier chapters, we wandered through their anatomy, noting the long legs that lifted their bodies and the slicing teeth that shaped their bites. Those details guide us now, helping us imagine how these animals stalked the creatures around them. Unlike the low-lying hunters of rivers and wetlands, the land-running crocs lived in a world where prey did not drift close on slow currents. Their prey walked, sprinted, hid, and listened. This changed everything about how the hunt unfolded. One of the most important choices any predator must make is whether to rely on ambush or pursuit. The Sebecids lived in environments that offered both possibilities. In dense Paleocene forests, where shadows ruled the ground and thick vegetation muffled sound, ambush could be powerful. A Sebecid might settle into a quiet crouch, its body blending with the dim light beneath the trees. Its long legs allowed it to lower its frame without sacrificing balance. In this stillness, it could listen for the gentle rustle of a small mammal or the cautious steps of a bird searching the forest floor. When the moment came, ambush was swift. The predator would rise just enough for a clean lunge, driving forward in a short, explosive burst. The first bite mattered most. A deep cut delivered with quick precision could weaken the prey before it could flee into undergrowth. Ambush favored patience and timing, traits that the Sebecids inherited from ancestors who had survived by waiting along riverbanks for millions of years. But these predators were not limited to stillness. Their bodies told another story, one built for movement. In open woodlands and early grasslands, pursuit became a powerful option. The long, upright legs of a Sebecid changed its relationship with the ground. Each stride lifted its weight in a straight line, reducing the side-to-side sway that slows modern crocodiles. This posture increased the length of each step and allowed a steady, controlled acceleration. A Sebecid in pursuit would not match the sprint of a cheetah or the endurance of a wolf, yet it carried a style all its own. Its gait was rhythmic and balanced, shaped by the relationship between its spine and its tail. When it ran, the body did not drag against the earth. Instead, it moved like a streamlined shadow, steady enough to maintain a chase without losing strength too quickly. This balance made it dangerous to prey animals that relied only on short bursts of speed. The success of pursuit hunts often depended on the terrain. In slightly uneven ground, where dips and rises shifted beneath the feet of running animals, a predator with stability had an advantage. The Sebecids could follow their prey through a series of turns, closing the distance with careful, persistent strides. Once close enough, a slicing bite to the flank or hind leg could bring the animal down. The predator did not need to tackle its prey with overwhelming force. It only needed to deliver a wound that hampered movement. The land would do the rest. In imagining these hunts, it helps to consider the behavior of certain modern animals. Though no living crocodile moves like a Sebecid, other creatures offer glimpses of similar strategies. Wolves, for example, rely on endurance and teamwork, but their steady pursuit of prey across open ground carries echoes of the persistence seen in land-running Crocs. They do not always need a sudden ambush. They chip away at distance, letting fatigue and timing guide the chase. Single predators like jaguars or leopards, though built for explosive attacks rather than pursuit, also provide helpful parallels. They navigate through forests with silent steps, listening for the right moment to strike. Their hunts unfold in the narrow windows between sound and stillness. A Sebecid moving through Paleocene forests may have mirrored this quiet tension, relying on controlled patience that flowed into swift action. Even certain birds of prey, especially those that chase smaller animals across open areas, reflect a similar combination of patience and pursuit. They glide quietly overhead, watching for movement. When the moment comes, they drop into controlled chases that rely on precision rather than overwhelming force. The Sebecids, grounded and reptilian, nevertheless shared that same balance between patience and power. Another key part of their hunting behavior was their sense of awareness. Standing higher above the ground than modern crocodiles, they could see farther across the landscape. Their forward-oriented eyes allowed them to judge depth, making it easier to track moving prey. This gave them greater control during the closing moments of a hunt, when a single misstep could give prey the chance to escape. Their agility, supported by limbs shaped for a terrestrial life, allowed them to maneuver around obstacles and adjust their direction without losing momentum. Even their tails contributed to this fluidity. Instead of acting primarily as a paddle, as in modern crocodiles, the The tail likely served as a counterbalance that shifted with each stride, keeping the torso steady as the legs drove the body forward. All of these traits, from the slicing bite to the steady gait, combined into a hunting style that belonged fully to the land. The Sebecids were not bound to water or limited to narrow feeding strategies. They lived in a world where prey could flee in any direction, and they evolved the tools to respond with precision, patience, and determined speed. In the vast and ever-changing ecosystems of ancient South America, these predators carved their place with quiet confidence. Their movements blended with the rhythm of the land, shaped by millions of years of ancestry, yet transformed into something new, something uniquely suited to the open ground beneath their feet. As we walk deeper into the ancient landscapes where the Sebecids once moved, the quiet world around them begins to reveal small clues about their daily lives. Leaves rustle with distant footfalls, shadows slip across the forest floor. The air carries faint scents of fruiting plants and damp soil. In this soft world, where each creature carved its own fragile path through time, the diets of the land-running crocodylomorphs shaped not only their bodies, but the entire rhythm of their ecosystems. Fossils help us trace those rhythms. They are silent, but they hold memories. When paleontologists examine the bones of ancient mammals from South America's Paleocene and Eocene layers, they sometimes find marks that do not belong to the natural wear of age or the gentle pressure of burial. Instead, they find thin grooves, paired cuts, and deep punctures with the unmistakable pattern of serrated teeth. These marks appear on ribs, on limb bones, even on fragments of skulls. The size and spacing of these cuts match the blades of Sebecid jaws, offering a clear picture of who fed upon whom in this long-vanished world. The prey available to these land-running crocs came in many shapes and sizes. Some were small and nimble, darting through the underbrush with quick, uncertain steps. Others were larger, sturdy creatures whose ancestors would one day evolve into forms we might recognize. Early ungulates, for instance, moved through the forests and open woodlands with narrow skulls and light hooves. They browsed on young shoots or plucked fruits from low branches. Their bodies were delicate compared to later hoofed mammals, but they were larger than the tiny insect eaters that shared the forest floor. These herbivores offered a steady source of meat, especially for predators that relied on slicing bites rather than crushing force. Giant rodents also lived across the continent during this time. Some of them reached impressive sizes, far larger than any living rodent today. Their rounded bodies and strong incisors helped them chew through tough vegetation. In the Paleocene and Eocene, these rodents filled ecological roles similar to small antelopes or hogs in later eras. They remained alert while foraging, pausing between bites to raise their heads and test the air for danger. A Sebecid, cloaked in the shadows of tall grasses or pressed against a tree trunk, could wait for just such a moment of hesitation. A swift burst of movement and a well-placed bite could pierce the softer tissues at the rodent's shoulder or flank. There were also the early relatives of ground sloths, though much smaller than the giants that would roam millions of years later. These early sloths moved slowly even in this ancient time, their limbs built for strength and climbing. They fed on leaves and tender shoots in the lower canopy, or on vines that hung from branches. If one ventured too close to the forest floor or lingered near a clearing, it might have found itself in the path of a land-running croc. Fossils hint at this interaction. Some sloth bones bear long, shallow slicing marks that align with the teeth of Sebecid predators. These marks suggest that even animals with thick hides were not immune to the swift cuts of a determined hunter. The prey landscape, though rich, was not quiet. South America's isolation allowed strange lineages to grow and flourish, but it also meant that predators competed intensely for each meal. The Sebecids lived alongside other carnivores, and each had its own tactics and advantages. Among the most striking were the terror birds, tall creatures with powerful beaks and strong legs. These birds patrolled the open spaces with long strides, their keen eyes scanning for movement. A terror bird could deliver crushing blows with its beak, making it a formidable rival for any predator crossing its path. Competition between the Sebecids and these birds was likely frequent. Their diets overlapped, their territories touched. A carcass found in a clearing might attract both, each approaching with caution. The Sebecid, with its slicing teeth and forward-focused eyes, carried an advantage in close quarters. The terror bird, with its height and sharp beak, held the advantage in a standoff. Fossils showing overlapping tooth marks and beak strikes on the same bones suggest that these animals sometimes fed from the same kills, perhaps chasing one another away or taking turns through intimidation. Other predators roamed these lands as well. Some were early mammals beginning to explore carnivorous lifestyles. Though smaller than the Sebecids, they could pursue smaller prey with agility. Their presence added tension to the hunt. A Sebecid might chase an ungulate, only to find that a nimble mammalian predator had taken advantage of the same opportunity. These interactions shaped their behavior. They encouraged stealth in some moments and persistence in others. They required the Sebecids to be adaptable, willing to shift strategies depending on who else shared the shadows nearby. Through all these interactions, the Sebecids maintained their identity as terrestrial hunters. Their meals were not drawn from rivers or ponds, but from the living, breathing creatures that walked the land. Their diet helped shape ecosystems, influencing which animals thrived and which remained cautious at the edges of clearings. In these woven relationships of prey and predator, the Sebecids found their place. Their teeth left their signatures across bones scattered through ancient soils. Their presence echoed in the behavior of the mammals that learned to avoid certain paths, and their role as hunters became one of the defining threads in the long, unfolding story of South America's ancient wildlife. As we continue drifting through the warm and shifting landscapes of ancient South America, it becomes easy to imagine how these land-running crocodile relatives moved, hunted, and lived. Their bodies reveal much. Their bones tell quiet stories. Yet one question still lingers like a soft echo in the back of the mind. What did these predators sound like? Sound is one of the most intimate aspects of an animal's life. It carries across trees, plains, and valleys. It bridges distances that sight cannot cross. Today, modern crocodiles use sound in ways that surprise many people. Though they are quiet for much of the day, they are capable of producing deep and resonant calls that seem far larger than their bodies. These vocalizations shake the water around them. They ripple across riverbanks. They carry through heavy air with a low, trembling hum. These sounds come from a combination of powerful lungs, strong vocal cords, and large air-filled spaces inside the skull and throat. When a modern crocodile bellows, the sound often begins as a vibration deep within the chest. It rises through the throat, then resonates through the skull like a drum. The jaw opens slightly, the throat swells, and the air around the animal trembles. Some calls are low rumbles, felt more than heard. Others are sharp hisses, created when air rushes across the teeth. Young crocodiles chirp softly from inside their eggs. Adults answer with deep grunts that signal protection or warning. These sounds shape much of their social world, even though they spend much of their lives in silence. When paleontologists study the skulls of Sebecids and their larger relatives, they notice patterns that suggest these ancient land crocs may have produced equally rich, resonant sounds. The skulls contain large cavities behind the snout and around the throat area. These cavities could have acted like natural amplifiers, shaping the air as it traveled through the mouth and nasal passages. they resemble the same kind of structures that help modern crocodiles create their iconic low-frequency bellows. The deeper parts of the skull, where the air moved before reaching the voice box, hold clues to the tones these animals may have produced. Many Sebecid skulls have spacious chambers that connect to the airways. These chambers may have allowed for vibrations that carried through bone and tissue. If modern crocodiles can produce sounds that shake the water around them, it is easy to imagine their ancient land relatives creating calls that carried across forests or plains. Because Sebecids were primarily terrestrial, their voices likely behaved differently from those of river-bound crocodiles. Water helps carry low sounds, allowing them to travel long distances. On land, sound spreads differently. It rises through grasses, reflects against trees, and softens with distance. A land croc would need a stronger initial call to reach the same distance, and its skull cavities may have helped create exactly to that. Picture a large Sebecid resting in the shade at the edge of a clearing. Its chest lifts slowly as it gathers air. When it vocalizes, the sound may begin as a deep rumble, like the low roll of distant thunder. This rumble could pass through the skull chambers, growing rounder and fuller as it moves. The throat swells slightly. The jaw opens in a controlled way. A resonant growl escapes, rising over the grasses and carrying into the forest. Smaller animals nearby pause. Birds fall silent. The call settles into the landscape like a reminder of presence. For the largest land crocs, such as the towering Barinasuchus, the sound may have been even deeper. Their skulls were longer and taller, with larger internal cavities. When they called, the vibrations may have rolled across the plains in long waves. These low calls could have served many purposes. They may have helped individuals mark territory, warn rivals, or locate potential mates. They may have acted as signals during dusk or dawn, when the air was cool and sound carried easily. The idea of giant land crocs calling across the open landscape is supported by the behavior of modern crocodilians. Though they spend much of their time in water, their most powerful calls often take place when their heads are held above the surface. Sound rises and spreads. The effect is dramatic. Even a human standing nearby can feel the vibration in the chest. If smaller Sebecids used similar calls, the forests of Paleocene and Eocene South America may have been filled with soft, resonant sounds during certain times of day. If larger ones called at dusk, the open Miocene plains may have heard deep pulses rolling through tall grass, blending with the distant rumble of grazing herds. These sounds were not roars. They were not the sharp cries of birds or the howls of later mammals. They were low, steady, controlled vibrations. They would feel ancient, shaped by lungs and skulls that carried the echoes of reptilian heritage. In these gentle, imagined soundscapes, the ancient land crocs find another dimension of life. Their voices, shaped by the same evolution that crafted their legs and teeth, may have drifted across the Cenozoic world like quiet reminders that the land still held predators whose roots reached far into Earth's deep past. As we drift deeper into this forgotten chapter of Earth's history, the world around the Sebecids grows warmer, greener, and more alive. The early Cenozoic was a time when the planet breathed in long, slow rhythms of heat. After the darkness and turmoil that followed the Great Extinction, sunlight returned with renewed strength. The air warmed gradually, then steadily, until the Earth entered one of the warmest periods it had known since the age of dinosaurs. This warmth shaped every corner of the land, nurturing vast forests, spreading rich vegetation, and creating the perfect stage for large reptiles to thrive once more. During the Paleocene and Eocene, temperatures across the globe rose to levels far above what we know today. Winters in many regions softened into gentle seasons, barely distinguishable from the rest of the year. The poles, once locked in ice, warmed enough to support forests. Tropical and subtropical zones expanded so widely that lush environments stretched into latitudes that now lie cool and temperate. These conditions created a world where dense vegetation cloaked the land like a warm blanket. Forests thrived in ways that feel almost dreamlike now. Giant palms lifted their broad fronds toward the light. Thick vines hung from towering canopies, weaving green shadows into the air. Flowering plants spread across the forest floor, adding flashes of color to the undergrowth. Ferns unfurled in the warm humidity, filling the spaces between tree roots and fallen logs. Even the nights held a warm glow, their air rich with the scent of flowering trees and damp, life-filled soil. In this gentle heat, reptiles found an ideal home. Their bodies, shaped by a metabolism that depends on external warmth, responded well to this climate. They did not need to rely heavily on the sun to warm their blood. Instead, the air itself carried enough heat to keep them active for longer parts of the day. Warm nights meant they could move without losing energy. Mild winters meant they experienced fewer hardships during seasonal changes. With temperatures so stable, reptiles could grow larger, move farther, and hunt with more consistency than in cooler ages. For the Sebecids, this warmth served as a quiet ally. Their long legs and upright posture already allowed them to roam across varied terrain. The warm climate extended the hours they could spend hunting or exploring, without the need to hide from cold mornings or retreat during cool evenings. They could adapt their behavior to the movement of prey. Early ungulates and giant rodents were active throughout the day and night, and the Sebecids could follow their rhythms with ease, resting in shade when needed but never forced into long periods of inactivity by cold air. The expansion of tropical and subtropical zones also created new ecosystems that these predators could enter. Forests that had once been limited to equatorial regions stretched far north and south. Woodlands formed continuous corridors between areas of dense vegetation and open clearings. Warm wetlands spread along river edges, feeding the roots of broadleaf trees. The landscapes changed constantly as forests advanced and retreated with shifting rainfall patterns. Each shift opened new habitats for the Sebecids to explore. These warm environments supported a wide variety of prey. The mammals that lived in these forests grew in number and diversity as the climate stabilized. Early hoofed mammals grazed in small herds along the edges of clearings, feeding on the abundant leaves and shoots. Giant rodents gnawed on bark or dug for roots in the soft soil. Small primates clung to branches overhead, and birds nested in the thick vegetation. This variety supported a complex food web, with the Sebecids standing near the top as powerful hunters shaped by opportunity and environment. Large reptiles thrived across the globe during this time, not only in South America. Other crocodylomorphs, turtles, and giant snakes found warm habitats in Africa, Asia, and North America. Their success across continents shows how deeply connected reptilian life is to climate. Warmth allows their bodies to function efficiently. It reduces the energy they spend on regulating temperature and increases the energy they can dedicate to movement, growth, and reproduction. In South America, this meant Sebecids could grow larger and remain active throughout much of the year. Their young could develop more quickly. Their eggs, if laid in warm soil or sheltered nests, could incubate without the threat of long cold periods. Their prey, abundant and constant, ensured they had steady access to food. All of these factors worked together like pieces of a quiet puzzle, shaping a world where land-running crocs could rise with confidence. The climate also influenced the vegetation these animals moved through. Forests that stayed green year-round created spaces filled with shadows and soft light. These shadows gave predators cover during hunts. They muffled the sound of footsteps. They created hidden paths through which a Sebecid could travel unnoticed. In open areas, warm breezes carried scents across long distances, helping these hunters detect prey with greater accuracy. Even the rainfall patterns played a role. Warm climates often bring high humidity and frequent storms. Each rainfall renewed the growth of plants, filling rivers and lakes, drawing herbivores to fresh vegetation. Predators, in turn, followed these patterns, learning where prey gathered after a storm or where the land remained lush during drier seasons. The warmth of the early Cenozoic did not simply create a backdrop for the Sebecids, it shaped their world at every level. It influenced their behavior, their growth, their interactions, and the very texture of their lives. In the gentle heat of this ancient age, large reptiles flourished once more, stepping into roles that nature opened for them in the long wake of the extinction. In this soft and thriving world, the land crocs carried their lineage forward, their lives entwined with the warm breath of a planet still healing, still changing, and still full of possibility. As the warm, thriving world of the early Cenozoic continued to grow and shift, the land-running crocs enjoyed a long era of dominance across South America's forests, woodlands, and spreading plains. Yet Earth never allows any one group of creatures to hold the stage forever. Quietly, in the underbrush and shadows, another lineage was learning to rise. These were the early carnivorous mammals, creatures whose ancestors had survived the Great Extinction as small, soft-footed survivors, hiding in burrows and climbing through branches. Now, as the climate stabilized and ecosystems matured, they began to explore new possibilities. To imagine these early mammals is to picture bodies that were far smaller than the croc predators that shared their world. Some were about the size of modern foxes, others smaller still. They carried agile limbs, light bones, and quick reflexes. Their ancestors had spent millions of years living in fear of reptilian giants. In this new age, they were no longer bound to that fear. They were still cautious, but caution had turned into opportunity. Evolution began shaping their bodies for speed, their claws for gripping, and their minds for problem-solving. These emerging carnivores were not yet the great cats or wolves that would one day walk the northern continents. Instead, they represented early branches of predatory mammals unique to South America. Some were ancestors of creatures known as Sparacidonts, a group that resembled small cats or weasels. Others were toothy generalists, capable of shifting diets depending on what the land offered. What bound them together was a shared direction. They were learning to hunt, to compete, and to challenge the reptilian predators that had ruled since the age of dinosaurs ended. While the Sebecids relied on posture, slicing jaws, and controlled bursts of speed, these mammals brought with them a different suite of strengths. Their bodies were built around warm-blooded metabolisms, which allowed for sustained activity even when temperatures cooled. They could chase longer, maintain stamina during long hunts, and recover more quickly after bouts of exertion. Their endurance gave them a quiet advantage, especially in environments where prey animals could flee across open spaces. Mammals also carried a rich sensory toolkit. Their hearing was delicate and wide-ranged, capable of detecting soft movements through brush or the distant rustling of prey. Their noses were keen, reading scents carried by shifting winds or left behind on trails. Their eyes, still adapting to brighter landscapes after generations spent in shadows, gained improved depth perception and faster responses. These senses allowed them to notice subtle details that a reptilian predator might overlook. A slight shift in vegetation, a faint scent along a stream, the echo of movement around a hill. But perhaps the greatest advantage of these early mammalian hunters lay in their agility. Their bodies could twist, leap, and accelerate in ways that land-running crocs could not match. They could scramble over fallen logs, navigate tight spaces between roots, or climb low branches to gain a better view of the surroundings. In dense forests, where movement required flexibility and quick decisions, mammals began to outmaneuver their larger reptilian rivals. Competition did not appear suddenly, it unfolded across thousands of generations. A Sebecid resting in the shade might occasionally notice a small mammal dart past, chasing insects or rodents. At first, these mammals posed no threat to the crocs. They were too small to challenge their hunting grounds or steal their prey. But as time passed, the mammals grew larger. Their limbs strengthened, their jaws sharpened, their teeth adopted shapes suited for cutting meat. Slowly, they expanded into the roles once held by reptiles. As mammals began to challenge them, the Sebecids faced new pressures. Prey animals that had once relied on speed alone now responded to predators with heightened awareness. They listened not only for the steady stride of a land croc, but also for the lighter, more unpredictable movements of mammalian hunters. Some herbivores learned to flee earlier, adjusting their grazing patterns to avoid the hours when multiple predators might be active. This shift created more competition for food and required the Sebecids to refine their strategies. In open areas, a mammal might pursue prey with persistent endurance, forcing the Sebecid to approach from angles that conserved energy. In forests, where shadows played tricks on the eyes, a mammal might slip into a narrow space too small for a reptile to follow. Each of these small advantages accumulated over time, gradually shaping the balance between predator groups. Yet the Sebecids still held strengths that mammals could not easily match. Their slicing jaws delivered deeper wounds. Their size intimidated smaller predators. Their vision, tuned for forward focus, helped them track movement through the undergrowth, and their legs, though different from those of mammals, gave them stability and force in crucial moments. For a long time, both groups shared the land, each thriving in different niches of the same ecosystems. To imagine these interactions is to picture a world alive with subtle tension. A young ungulate grazing in a clearing must listen for the heavy but controlled steps of a Sebecid emerging from the forest edge. At the same time, it must notice the barely audible rustle of a mammalian predator stalking from the opposite direction. Competition created a web of sound and movement, woven tightly by the animals that depended on survival. The rise of mammal competitors did not happen in a single moment. It was a slow, wandering shift shaped by climate, vegetation, and the quiet pressure of adaptation. Over time, the mammals grew bolder, stronger, and more capable. Their agility and endurance reshaped South America's predator landscape, guiding the ancient world toward a future where warm-blooded hunters would eventually claim the highest roles. For now, in this warm and thriving age, both groups walked side by side, their paths crossing in shadowed forests and open savannas, each shaping the destiny of the other as the ancient story continued to unfold. As we move softly through the ancient world shaped by warmth and shifting life, the landscapes of South America reveal a quiet secret that guided the rise of the land-running crocs. It is a secret written not in bones or footprints but in shapes of continents and the long patience of deep time. South America, during the tens of millions of years after the Great Extinction, stood alone. The oceans around it formed a wide and wandering moat, turning the entire continent into what scientists sometimes call an evolutionary island. This isolation was not sudden. It had begun long before the dinosaurs vanished. During the slow drifting of continents across Earth's surface, South America separated from Africa and later from Antarctica, drifting into its own warm corner of the world. Once the seas widened enough, creatures on the continent could no longer cross into other lands, and those on distant shores could no longer reach it. Life within South America became contained, shaped by its own weather, its own geography, its own quiet pressures. This separation lasted for millions upon millions of years. While northern continents experienced waves of migration as land bridges formed and vanished, South America remained untouched by outside predators or competitors. In this gentle solitude, ancient lineages survived long after they faded elsewhere. Some of the animals that roamed South America during the Paleocene and Eocene had roots stretching back to times older than the dinosaurs themselves. They thrived not because they were the most advanced or the most powerful, but because the land around them asked nothing more than for them to adapt to its rhythms. For the Sebecids and their larger relatives, this isolation offered an open road. On continents connected to the north, early carnivorous mammals rapidly rose in strength and size, filling the roles left behind by the vanished dinosaurs. Wolves, big cats, and other mammalian hunters would one day claim top positions there. But South America did not receive those early migrants. It held only its own small mammals, still cautious, still early in their journey. No large mammalian predators arrived to challenge the croc lineage. No wave of new hunters swept down from foreign lands. Because of this, the land crocs were able to rise into the roles of apex predators with confidence. Their bodies, already adapted for terrestrial life, faced little competition from warm-blooded rivals. Their slicing teeth and long legs allowed them to hunt creatures that had no memory of reptilian pursuit. They were not simply surviving here, they were flourishing. Across the continent, the forests were alive with creatures that had evolved in solitude. There were early hoofed mammals that resembled delicate shadows of those that would one day live in Africa or Asia. There were giant rodents unlike anything the rest of the world had seen. Tree-dwelling species with ancient roots moved slowly through the canopy. Ground, sloths in their early and modest forms wandered the understory. Each lineage carried traces of a past shaped without outside influence. The Sebecids lived within this mosaic, their bodies and behaviors perfectly suited to a land where no large carnivorous mammals had yet arrived. Their success was not a matter of overpowering competition. It was a matter of filling spaces that were theirs simply because no one else had stepped into them. This quiet state of isolation also helped preserve the older branches of the Crocodylomorph family tree. In other parts of the world, land croc relatives had appeared and vanished long before the Cenozoic reached its full warmth. Dinosaur predators had kept them in the shadows during the Mesozoic. Later, rising mammalian hunters took over after the extinction. But in South America, neither of these pressures existed at the same intensity. Here, ancient lineages could breathe freely, explore new forms, and rise to impressive sizes. Barinasuchus, with its towering frame and slicing jaws, is a perfect example of what long isolation can create. No other continent produced a land croc of such scale during this time. The only reason it existed is that South America allowed it to. It offered room for these predators to evolve into giants, to hold territory, to shape ecosystems, and to hunt without being overshadowed by larger, more rapidly evolving mammals. Isolation also slowed the arms race of predation and defense. Mammals evolved new abilities, but their progress unfolded at a different pace than in the north. Prey animals reacted to Sebecids rather than to big cats or wolves. Their instincts shaped themselves around reptilian hunters whose movements and strategies were unlike anything that would later appear elsewhere. For millions of years, this peaceful separation continued. Forests expanded, grasslands formed, rivers carved new paths, and through all of it, the land crocs remained among the most powerful creatures on the Caucasus continent. They thrived not because the world was easy, but because it was self-contained. They faced challenges, Yet none of those challenges arrived in sudden waves from distant lands. South America's long isolation preserved a chapter of evolution that the rest of the world had already closed. It sheltered ancient lineages, nurtured unusual shapes, and allowed predators like the Sebecids to rise into roles they would never have claimed elsewhere. In this quiet and singular landscape, the land crocs became more than survivors. They became the rulers of an island continent, floating through deep time, carrying with them echoes of a world that had vanished everywhere else. As we continue wandering through the quiet corridors of deep time, the land crocs of South America feel like a story contained neatly within one continent. The warmth, the isolation, the ancient lineages preserved in solitude, all of it seems to belong to a world that existed apart from everything else. Yet fossils, scattered across distant lands, whisper of another truth. The Sebecids were not alone in their experiment. Long before South America fully settled into its role as an evolutionary island, and even long after, other corners of the earth hosted their own land-running crocodile kin. These discoveries begin in fragments, as they often do: a jawbone uncovered in North Africa, teeth found in European riverbeds, a partial skull emerging from clay in the Mediterranean region. Each fossil carries the same unfamiliar shape, the same slender, serrated teeth, the same hints of a body built for life on land. At first, paleontologists treated these remains as isolated curiosities, but, over time, as more bones surfaced, a pattern formed, soft and surprising. These fossils revealed that land-adapted crocodylomorphs lived not only in South America, but had spread across several continents during different windows of Earth's history. They were present in parts of Africa, especially in regions that once held warm forests and open plains. They left traces in Europe during eras when the continent was warmer, more humid, and filled with ecosystems that could support large reptiles. Some species even appeared in Western Asia, suggesting that these animals had lived across a wide stretch of the ancient world. Each lineage was distinct, shaped by the unique pressures of its home environment, yet all of them shared the same general direction: a move toward upright posture, long legs, and slicing teeth suited for terrestrial hunting. These similarities show that the evolution of land-running crocs was not a single event isolated in South America. It was a broader story, one written in multiple places where climate and opportunity aligned. In Africa, for example, fossils show the presence of croc relatives that lived during the early Cenozoic and filled predator roles similar to the Sebecids. These species hunted in environments that ranged from semi-tropical woodlands to sprawling savannas. Their skulls carried the same deep jaws. Their teeth bore serrations like the edge of a stone-crafted blade. Their limbs suggest that they walked with steady strides on firm ground. Though their exact lifestyles remain partly hidden by time, their bones offer enough clues to imagine them stalking early mammals along riverbanks and through patches of open forest. Europe tells another chapter. During the Eocene, the continent was far warmer than it is now. Lush forests stretched across much of the land, and large reptiles thrived in the humid climate. Among them lived land-running crocodylomorphs, known from partial skeletons and isolated bones. Though smaller than the titans of South America, they echo the same evolutionary theme: deep snouts, forward-oriented eyes, blade-like teeth arranged for slashing. These fossils reveal that European ecosystems once supported reptilian predators that moved across the ground rather than hiding in rivers. This broad distribution of terrestrial crocodylomorphs challenges an old assumption about the early Cenozoic world. For many years, scientists believed that mammals rose quickly into the role of apex predators everywhere after the Great Extinction. In this view, warm-blooded carnivores rapidly took over the land, pushing reptiles back into aquatic or semi-aquatic niches. But the fossils tell a more complicated, more intricate story. In many places, mammals did rise as major hunters, yet in others, reptilian predators held ground for far longer than expected. The presence of land croc lineages throughout Africa, Europe, and parts of Asia shows that reptiles did not retreat quietly as mammals advanced. Instead, they explored new niches, adapted to land-based hunting, and persisted alongside their mammalian rivals for millions of years. These discoveries reveal a world where dominance was not simply handed from dinosaurs to mammals, it was negotiated slowly through countless interactions. In some regions, mammals gained the upper hand quickly, developing sharp senses and fast metabolisms. In others, the reptiles maintained their grip on the land, using patience, power, and deep-rooted resilience to compete successfully. The repeated emergence of land-running crocs across multiple continents also offers a quiet lesson about evolution itself. Similar environmental pressures can guide unrelated species towards similar solutions. When forests opened into scattered clearings and prey animals grew in size and number, natural selection shaped the bodies of these distant croc lineages toward the same general form: upright stance, long legs, slicing teeth. It is a pattern that suggests land predation was not a path exclusive to mammals. Reptiles, too, could claim that role when the world gave them space. Even as climates shifted, as continents drifted, and as mammalian predators eventually spread into new regions, these land crocs continued to appear in the fossil record. They did not vanish quickly or quietly. They remained part of the story far longer than once believed, their presence preserved in rocks scattered from the tropics of Africa to the ancient river systems of Europe. In all these distant lands, the land crocs walked paths now lost to time. Their movements echoed through forests that no longer exist. Their calls may have carried across plains that later grew cold, and their bones, resting in the silence of stone, remind us that Earth's past held more possibilities than the present can easily reveal. As our quiet journey continues, the land crocs of the Cenozoic stand before us like striking figures on a long and winding branch of life's history. Their bodies, their teeth, their strange mixture of familiar and unexpected traits all whisper of roots that reach far beyond the warm forests and grassy plains where they once hunted. To truly understand them, we must drift gently backward through time, far past the ancient rivers of South America, past the warm glow of the early Cenozoic, past the long age of dinosaurs, and into a world far older. Their story begins in the Triassic, more than 200 million years ago, when Earth was a place of new beginnings. The continents were gathered into a single enormous landmass called Pangaea. Volcanic landscapes stretched across wide plains. The air was warm and dry. Forests were sparse and patchy. Life was in the early stages of reorganizing itself after one of the most devastating extinctions Earth had ever seen. From this landscape, the earliest crocodylomorphs appeared. The first members of this lineage were astonishingly different from the crocodiles we know today. They were small, lightly built animals, often no larger than a dog or a fox. They lived on land rather than in water. Some ran with long, slender limbs that lifted them high above the ground. Others climbed through vegetation or scurried across open soil. Their skulls were narrow, their jaws filled with sharp teeth, and their bodies gave little hint of the slow-moving reptilian giants that would appear millions of years later. From these beginnings, the crocodylomorph tree began to branch. Across the Triassic and into the Jurassic, this group explored almost every ecological path available. Some species grew longer and slimmer, becoming swift runners. Others developed heavy armor along their backs, their bodies protected by thick plates. A few lineages even attempted styles of movement that were neither fully reptilian nor fully mammalian, blending characteristics of both in a way modern eyes find difficult to categorize. As Earth moved into the age of dinosaurs, crocodilomorphs did not fade, nor did they remain simple creatures at the edges of ecosystems. Instead, they diversified in directions both familiar and wonderfully strange. Some became coastal hunters, slipping through shallow waters in search of fish. Others returned to the land with renewed confidence, growing larger and taking on roles as predators. A few evolved deep snouts filled with crushing teeth, perfect for cracking the shells of turtles or ammonites. Others developed long jaws lined with needle-thin teeth, suited for catching fish. It was during this time that the ancestors of modern crocodiles began to take shape. These early forms crept along riverbanks and swam through quiet lagoons. Their eyes rose to the tops of their heads. Their limbs shifted into positions that allowed short bursts of speed on land and smooth power in the water. Their bodies, streamlined by evolution, began to resemble the animals we see today. Yet even as these familiar shapes emerged, many other crocodilomorphs continued down their own evolutionary paths. Over millions of years, this family tree became one of the most diverse in the entire animal kingdom. Some lineages grew to enormous sizes, rivaling the great dinosaurs of their time. Others remained small, adapting to life in forests or across ancient shorelines. When the dinosaurs fell, it was not only mammals that rose into new roles. Certain crocodilomorphs stepped forward as well, especially in isolated places like South America, where the Sebecids embraced a lifestyle unknown to their river-dwelling cousins. This repeated reinvention is one of the most remarkable traits of the croc lineage. While many groups of animals follow a single evolutionary direction, crocodilomorphs explored a wide range of possibilities again and again. They became sprinters, swimmers, diggers, ambush hunters, long-distance runners, and even plant eaters. Each shift reflected a moment in Earth's history when the world opened a door and these animals were ready to step through. The land crocs we have followed through this story are one such reinvention. They were not simply crocodiles that wandered onto land. They were descendants of a much older branch that had long carried the potential for terrestrial life. Their upright limbs and slicing teeth were not accidents. They were echoes of ancient forms that had lived millions of years earlier, adapted once more for a new age and a new world. As climate warmed and continents moved, crocodilomorphs adapted. When ecosystems changed or competition grew, they shifted their diets, their habitats, even their entire body plans. Their lineage bent without breaking, allowing them to survive environmental changes that erased other animals entirely. This resilience is why crocodiles exist today, in forms that still resemble their ancient ancestors. It is also why the fossil record contains so many surprising shapes that bear the crocodilomorph signature, yet look almost nothing like the crocodiles we know. When we look at a modern crocodile, resting quietly at the edge of a river, we see only the latest chapter in a story that stretches back to the Triassic. Hidden within its silhouette are fragments of ancient runners, armored wanderers, deep-sea hunters, and terrestrial predators. And woven among those fragments are the hints of creatures like the Sebecids, which once chased prey through forests and across plains under the warm glow of a world in transition. The crocodilomorph family tree is not just a record of survival, it is a record of transformation. It is a reminder that evolution rarely travels in a straight line. Instead, it explores, wanders, and returns to old ideas made new again. In this long and branching history, the land-running crocs hold a place of quiet wonder, a testament to the countless ways life reshapes itself as Earth continues its ancient journey through time. As we continue drifting through the ancient worlds that shape the land-running crocs, a new picture begins to form, soft and steady, built not from forests or prey animals or shifting climates, but from the physics that guided every step these creatures took. Their bones, silent and patient in the ground, offer clues that help us imagine how they moved. In these clues, we find the story of bodies shaped for land in ways unlike any modern crocodile, yet deeply connected to the long lineage that gave them life. When paleontologists study fossil limb bones from Sebecids and their relatives, they find structures that feel almost surprising. The bones are long and strong, built to hold weight in a way that differs from the low, sprawling stance of river-dwelling crocodiles. The joints sit high and close to the body, forming angles that look more like the limbs of running mammals than those of reptiles. Each part of the skeleton fits together in a way that reveals the rhythm of movement even after millions of years of silence. If we could watch a Sebecid place its foot on the ground, the motion would look balanced and deliberate. Unlike modern crocs, whose legs project out to the sides and swing in wide arcs, the land-running crocs walked with their legs positioned directly beneath them. This upright posture changed the entire physics of their movement. It allowed the body to rise higher off the ground, granting a longer stride. It reduced side-to-side motion, guiding the animal forward with smooth efficiency. Why this shift happened becomes clearer when we consider the world they lived in. On riversides and muddy banks, a sprawling stance helps modern crocodiles push through water, flatten themselves for ambush, and maintain stability in slippery terrain. But life on land asks for something different. It requires a body that can move quickly and keep balance on uneven surfaces. It favors limbs that can hold weight in vertical lines rather than wide angles. Sebecids, shaped by dry forests and open spaces, followed these demands with quiet precision. Their limb bones show long shafts suited for steady running. The joints appear to have been capable of a forward swinging motion rather than a sideways splay. The muscles that once attached to these bones left subtle marks that suggest power arranged for stride rather than for pushing through water. Even the shapes of their toes and claws support the image of animals that gripped soil and leaf litter rather than river mud. When reconstructed digitally or through biomechanical modeling, the gait of these ancient predators resembles something between a dog-like trot and the careful, weight-balanced steps of certain ground-dwelling birds. Their movements were neither stiff nor awkward. They carried a fluid confidence that let them navigate through forests, chase prey, and travel long distances without excessive bursts of energy. The position of their legs beneath their bodies also allowed them to conserve energy. Instead of supporting their weight with constant muscular effort, as sprawling reptiles often do, they relied on bone alignment to bear much of the load. This alignment created a more efficient form of movement that helped them stay active for long stretches of the day. In a world where prey could run, hide, and flee across varied landscapes, this efficiency mattered. Speed plays a quiet but important role in this story. Though Sebecids would not have matched the rapid sprint of a gazelle or the lightning pounce of a cat, they moved with a pace that combined stability and acceleration. Their feet landed beneath their center of gravity, helping them maintain balance as they ran. Their long legs extended their stride. Their bodies, held high off the ground, reduced resistance as they moved forward. In speed and stride, they may have resembled modern canids during certain gaits, though with a heavier and more grounded presence. Their spinal structure, less flexible than that of a running mammal, limited their ability to stretch fully into a leaping stride. Yet this did not diminish their effectiveness. Instead, They excelled in bursts of controlled speed and in long, steady pursuits that forced prey to expend more energy than they could afford. The physics of their movement also shaped their hunting strategies. A creature built for stability and endurance can track prey through dense vegetation without stumbling. It can adjust its direction smoothly when a fleeing animal changes course. It can maintain pursuit longer than a predator that relies entirely on short, explosive sprints. In this way, the Sebecids carved out a style of hunting that relied not only on sharp teeth and strong jaws, but on the patient and measured rhythm of their footsteps. Even their tails likely played a role in movement. Though not as muscular as those of modern crocodiles adapted for swimming, their tails still offered balance. As they ran, the tail may have acted as a counterweight, shifting gently with each stride, stabilizing the body through turns and uneven ground. This quiet companion to their limbs helped make their gait smoother, more efficient, and better suited for life on land. In imagining their movement, we see more than just the mechanical action of bones and muscles. We see the slow work of evolution, shaping bodies for a new world. The Sebecids did not simply inherit the land, they earned it through countless generations of subtle changes. Their limbs rose beneath them, their strides lengthened, their bodies adapted to the physics of dry ground and open space. And so, as we picture them walking through forests warmed by early Cenozoic sun, or running across the edges of clearing where prey grazed in quiet groups, we see the grace of creatures that blended reptilian heritage with a new way of moving. Their footsteps, steady and sure, carried the echoes of ancient ancestors while guiding them into roles that reshaped the landscapes of their time. In these rhythms of movement, the land-running Crocs lived out a chapter of Earth's story, where physics, biology, and evolution danced together in soft and surprising harmony. As we move deeper into the quiet world once shaped by the land-running Crocs, the forests and plains around them take on a new texture. Sunlight catches the edges of leaves, shadows stretch across the ground, the air carries soft vibrations from voices, footsteps, and the movement of distant herds. In this world, survival depended on more than strong jaws or swift legs. It depended on the senses, the subtle instruments that allowed these ancient predators to read their environment with a precision shaped by millions of years. For modern crocodiles, vision is a tool shaped by water. Their eyes sit high on their heads, watching from just above the surface while the rest of the body remains hidden. They see well in dim light. They track ripples and reflections across still ponds. But for their land-running relatives, life unfolded not beneath the surface, but across open ground and within dense vegetation. Their eyes evolved to meet the demands of a world filled with motion, light, shifting shadows. Fossil skulls offer delicate hints. The placement of the eye sockets tells us that many Sebecids and other land-adapted crocodylomorphs had forward-leaning vision, allowing a greater overlap between the fields of their eyes. This overlap created depth perception, a crucial ability for predators that chase moving prey. Vision like this helps an animal judge the distance between itself and its target. It allows for precise timing in lunges. It guides the feet as they navigate roots, fallen branches, and uneven ground. Their eyes were also positioned higher than those of most mammals, giving them a broad field of view. From a slightly elevated head posture, they could scan through light and shadow, watching for subtle changes that suggested movement. The forests and forests' edges of early South America were full of life, and a predator that could see clearly through patches of sun and darkness held a gentle advantage. Yet vision alone could not guide every moment of their hunts. Another sense, tucked quietly within the bones of the jaw, played an important role. Modern crocodiles are famous for the small pressure-sensitive pits dotting their jaws. These tiny organs detect vibrations in water with remarkable accuracy. A splash, a slight disturbance, even the gentle pressure wave created by a swimming fish can be detected instantly. In water, these sensors act like an extension of the animal's awareness, turning darkness into something almost visible. But for land-running crocs, these sensors carried limitations. On dry ground, vibrations do not travel in the same way. Air does not hold pressure waves as water does. Soil absorbs or scatters them depending on its texture. Fossils show that the land crocs retain some of these jaw sensors, but far fewer than their modern aquatic relatives. Instead of acting as a primary sense, they became tools for close-range encounters. When prey struggled within their jaws, the sensors helped the predator adjust its grip, guiding slicing movements with precision. They may have also helped detect subtle touches, such as an object brushing against the snout or the faint pressure of a small animal moving near their face. But unlike crocodiles that wait beneath the surface, the land crocs relied far more on sight and hearing than on these pressure-sensitive pits. To understand their intelligence, paleontologists study the shape and volume of brain cavities inside fossil skulls. Though brain tissue does not fossilize, the space it once occupied remains. This space reveals which regions of the brain were larger or smaller. In many Sebecids, the olfactory bulbs, which process smells, appear moderately developed. This suggests that scent played an important but not dominant role in their world. It may have helped them track wounded prey, recognize other members of their species, or identify territories marked by mammals and birds. The visual processing region of the brain appears somewhat more developed. This matches the needs of a land predator that depended on careful tracking and depth perception. Strong visual regions would allow them to follow movement across long distances, notice shifts in body posture, and time their attacks during a chase. The parts of the brain associated with balance and coordination also show signs of refinement. These regions help control the body's stability and the precision of each step. For an animal with upright legs and a long, balanced stride, such development would be essential. Navigating uneven terrain, adjusting speed during a pursuit, or turning suddenly to match the direction of fleeing prey, all required strong coordination. Intelligence in reptiles is not measured in the same way as intelligence in mammals. It is quieter, more instinctive, more focused on environmental awareness than complex problem-solving. But in the brain cavities of these land crocs, we see hints of a mind adapted to a dynamic landscape. They understood movement and timing. They interpreted visual cues quickly. They adjusted their jaws with controlled precision. They carried the awareness necessary to hunt in a world where prey could run in any direction. Their sensory world was one of subtle contrasts. Cool morning air carried scents over dewy ground. The rustle of leaves signaled a step, a shift, a possible meal. Light filtered through trees in shifting patterns, guiding the eyes of a predator waiting patiently in the shadows. Their senses were tuned to this softness, not sharp like an eagle's, not analytical like an early mammal's, but woven into the land itself. As we imagine them moving through forests or open clearings, their heads tilting slightly as they listen, their eyes fixed with calm precision on a moving shape ahead, we see how their perceptions shaped their lives. Their senses were not loud or dramatic. They were steady. They were balanced. They were crafted by millions of years of quiet adaptation. In these sensory abilities, the land crocs found a way to thrive, reading the world with a careful intelligence that helped them navigate the landscapes that once belonged to them alone. As we continue wandering through the quiet world shaped by the land-running crocs, another question begins to rise softly in the background. It is not about speed or teeth or strength. It is about family and the small, hidden moments that never leave fossils behind. Moments of watching, guarding, guiding, moments that helped these ancient predators survive across shifting climates and changing landscapes. To understand how they may have raised their young, we look first to the relatives that still share our world today. Modern crocodiles, despite their fierce reputation, are some of the most attentive reptilian parents on Earth. A mother crocodile builds a nest out of vegetation or soft soil, shaping it carefully with her snout and claws. She places her eggs inside with deliberate precision, then listens for changes in temperature or threats in the surrounding forest. When the young are ready to hatch, she hears their tiny calls from inside the eggs. She uncovers the nest gently. She may even carry her hatchlings in her mouth to the water so they can begin their first steps into life. This level of care feels almost tender. It reveals something deep within the crocodilian lineage, a behavioral thread that stretches far beyond the modern day. Though the land-running crocs lived in a very different world, with different bodies and habits, they carried the same ancient roots. Fossils show us their bones and teeth, but behavior must be pieced together from clues, comparisons, and patterns that have endured for millions of years. If we imagine a Sebecid preparing to lay its eggs, the scene likely begins with warmth. These creatures lived in climates where heat settled into the soil. A mother may have chosen a sunlit patch of ground near the base of a tree, or a mound of decomposing plant matter warmed by natural decay. The soil in these areas could provide a steady temperature that helped the eggs develop. Modern crocodiles often choose such places. The land crocs, living far from water, would have made choices based on dry habitats rather than riverbanks. Yet the principle would have been similar. The nests would have been simple but purposeful. Perhaps a shallow pit lined with leaves or loose soil, perhaps a mound of vegetation gathered by sweeping motions of the forelimbs. Each egg, shaped by fragile shells, held a young reptile that depended on heat, moisture, and protection. The mother, sensing these needs instinctively, may have stayed nearby. Even without water to anchor her territory, she could linger in the surrounding vegetation, listening and watching. Whether these ancient predators guarded their nests directly cannot be proven with certainty, yet many signs point toward the possibility. Guarding behavior is ancient among crocodilians. It likely emerged long before the Sebecids diverged from their aquatic kin. The upright posture and terrestrial lifestyle of these land crocs may have even improved their ability to defend a nest. They could move quickly across ground, raising their bodies high to appear larger to potential threats. Small mammals, curious birds, and even other reptiles might have been driven away by a warning hiss or a sudden step. Once the young began to hatch, the forest floor would have filled with soft, delicate sounds, tiny cracks in the eggs, gentle chirps or squeaks from the hatchlings. The mother, if she was close, might have responded. Modern crocodile hatchlings call to their mothers, and the mothers reply. These calls trigger protective behavior. The same pattern could have unfolded among the land crocs. A mother hearing her hatchlings might have returned to the nest, nudging soil aside, uncovering the eggs with slow, careful motions. What happened after hatching is more difficult to imagine, yet not impossible. Modern crocodile mothers sometimes carry their young in their jaws, but for a land-running species with slicing teeth, this method may have been unsafe. Instead, the young might have followed their mother from the nest, staying in the shadows of her larger body. She could have led them to safer areas, perhaps dense vegetation that offered protection from aerial predators or mammals hunting for food. The young would have been small, light, and vulnerable. Their first challenges would not have come from large predators alone, but from the very landscape itself. Dry ground, sudden temperature changes, and the need to find food quickly would have shaped their earliest days. Parental care, even if brief, would have increased their chances of survival significantly. A mother lingering near her offspring could deter predators long enough for the hatchlings to grow stronger. She could help them avoid dangerous areas or guide them toward sources of insects, small vertebrates, or hiding places. Some species of crocodilians today guard their young for weeks or even months. If the land crocs followed a similar pattern, their young may have formed small groups around the proper mother, learning to move through forests and grasslands by watching her steps. As they grew, their instincts would sharpen. They would begin to hunt small prey, practicing the same behaviors they would one day master as adults. These early moments, though invisible to the fossil record, played a crucial role in shaping their lineage. Parental care reduced mortality. It allowed more young to survive long enough to reach adulthood. This stability supported the long reign of land-running crocs across South America and other continents. Each generation began with a mother who invested time and presence into the fragile promise of life hidden beneath leaves and soil. In this soft vision of ancient forests, the land crocs become more than predators. They become caretakers in quiet moments, shaping the next chapter of their lineage with patience, instinct, and the ancient rhythms of survival passed down through millions of years. As we move deeper into the ancient landscapes, where the land-running crocs once shaped the rhythms of life, the warm forests and open plains reveal a quieter truth. No predator, no matter how skilled or ancient, walked alone at the top. The world they inherited after the Great Extinction was rich with new life, and in that richness came competition. Every shadow, every clearing, every distant call carried the presence of another hunter. Some were feathered giants with sharp beaks. Others were rising mammals testing the edges of new power. Together, they wove a tapestry of ancient rivalry that lived and died long before any human set foot on these lands. The most striking of these rivals were the terror birds. These towering, flightless hunters strode across much of South America for millions of years. With legs built for speed and beaks designed for crushing, they filled the role of swift and aggressive predators. Their bodies were tall and balanced, their strides long and purposeful. In open areas, where grasses swayed under warm winds and small mammals grazed cautiously, their silhouettes cast long shadows. A Sebecid crossing those same plains would have been aware of them, not afraid in the way prey animals were, but cautious, respectful of the danger they posed. Terror birds hunted with a rhythm entirely different from reptilian predators. They struck downward with precision, delivering blows strong enough to break bone. In contrast, the land-running crocs relied on slicing bites and controlled bursts of speed. Their paths could cross when both pursued the same prey or when each approached a carcass left by another predator. Fossils hint at such interactions in subtle ways. At certain sites, deep cuts made by serrated teeth appear alongside punctures that match the sharp points of terror bird beaks. On some bones, the injuries overlap, suggesting that both predators fed on the same animal, perhaps even at the same time. Did they face each other in tense confrontations over a fresh kill? Or did one arrive after the other, leaving only traces of its presence in marks on the bone? The fossils do not speak aloud, but their silence holds possibilities that drift softly through our imagination. In forested areas, where shadows move gently among tree trunks, encounters may have unfolded differently. A Sebecid pushing between ferns might have heard the soft thud of a terror bird running nearby. The dense vegetation created blind corners, places where predators could appear suddenly. The birds, taller and able to see over low growth, held an advantage in visibility. The land crocs held an advantage in delivering deep, tearing bites. Each knew the strengths of its own body. Each sensed the presence of the other in the whisper of leaves or the tension in the air. As time passed and climates changed, mammals began to rise into the role of large predators as well. In South America, one group in particular, the Sparacidonts, grew into agile carnivores with sharp teeth and nimble bodies. They were not true cats or dogs, yet they carried a spirit of agility that echoed the hunters we know today. Their light steps allowed them to navigate around obstacles with ease. Their warm-blooded metabolisms helped them chase prey longer than the reptiles could manage. A land croc meeting one of these mammals at a carcass would have found a new kind of rival. Instead of towering height or crushing force, it would face speed and flexibility. The Sebecids' deep snout and slicing teeth offered powerful close-range attacks, but the mammal's quick movements made it harder to land such bites. The fossil record hints at these interactions too. At certain sites, bones show bite marks that differ in shape and depth, suggesting that reptiles and mammals fed from the same remains. Sometimes the marks overlap. Sometimes they appear side by side, telling us that competition was common and varied. One site in particular, filled with bones gathered by ancient waters long ago, holds marks from both crocs and early mammals. Some bones carry long, narrow cuts. Others show crushing damage from different tooth shapes. This mixture suggests a landscape where predators arrived one after another, each leaving its signature on the remains. The bones lay scattered across ancient floodplains, preserved by layers of mud and silt that slowly sealed away the stories of these long-vanished hunters. These fossil sites offer quiet glimpses into the dynamics of ancient competition. They show us that the land crocs were not isolated rulers. They lived in a world where other predators tested their strength, challenged their claims to territory, and forced them to refine their skills. Terror birds brought the threat of tall, sharp-eyed speed. Early mammals brought the beginnings of endurance and agility. Each encounter shaped the behavior of the Sebecids, guiding their hunts and influencing where they roamed. Yet, despite these challenges, the land-running crocs remained powerful forces across their ecosystems. They adapted, they endured, they learned the patterns of their rivals, and those rivals learned theirs. In this balance of power, the forests and plains of ancient South America held a quiet tension woven from the movements of hunters who shared the same sunlit world. As we drift away from these scenes of long-forgotten conflict, the landscape settles again into soft stillness. The bones beneath the earth continue their silent watch, holding traces of interactions that shaped the ancient rhythms of life. Through these traces, we glimpse the moments when apex predators crossed paths, challenged each other, and walked together through a world far older than our own. As we continue drifting through this long and intricate story of Earth's recovering world, the land-running crocs stand tall in our imagination. They were powerful, they were agile, they were shaped by deep time and sharpened by opportunity. For a moment in the ancient Cenozoic, they claimed roles once held by the great dinosaurs. They spread across South America and left their tracks in parts of Africa and Europe. They hunted with confidence across landscapes that trembled with new life. And yet, for all their strength and adaptation, they never became global rulers. Their time on Earth, though impressive, had boundaries. Their reach, though wide, was not limitless. To understand why, we must look gently at the forces that shape life over millions of years, the tiny shifts in climate, the quiet tug of competition, and the soft but persistent limits of food and habitat. These forces are subtle on the scale of a single lifetime, yet powerful across epochs. After the Great Extinction that ended the age of dinosaurs, the world entered a long period of change. Temperatures rose, lush forests stretched farther north and south, The warmth allowed reptiles to grow large and thrive. It was during this time that the land crocs flourished, stepping into open roles and expanding into new environments. For them, heat was not simply comfort, it was survival. Reptilian bodies depend on warmth to function. Muscles move smoothly in warm air, digestion becomes easier, the senses sharpen. A warm climate created opportunities, and they used these opportunities well. But the Earth is never still. The climate that once supported the rise of these remarkable hunters began to shift again. Over millions of years, temperatures gradually cooled. Seasons became more distinct. Forests thinned in places. The rich, humid environments that had given strength to reptilian predators retreated, replaced by drier or cooler regions that favored mammals. The land crocs, tied closely to warmth, found their world slowly rearranging around them. In cooler climates, their bodies would have taken longer to warm in the morning. A long warming period meant slower reflexes, slower reactions, and fewer active hunting hours. Mammals, with their warm-blooded metabolisms, could move at dawn, dusk, or even through chillier weather. This shift in daily rhythm alone began to tilt the balance. A predator that loses precious hours of activity risks losing access to food. Food was another quiet force shaping their fate. The land crocs relied on prey large enough to make their hunting strategies worthwhile. Early mammals grew larger over time. Some became swift runners, others became tougher, able to fight back with sharp teeth or powerful limbs. As climates cooled and vegetation changed, mammalian herbivores diversified. Herds moved across wider ranges in search of consistent food. The land crocs, designed for powerful sprints rather than long chases, faced difficulties keeping up with prey that could roam across cooler plains with ease. Resource limitations soon followed. As forests shrank in certain regions, large reptiles found fewer sheltered spots for nesting and fewer warm areas for maintaining body temperature. Mammals adapted more quickly to these new environments, using fur for insulation and metabolic heat to survive cold nights. Their young matured faster and required less dependence on environmental warmth. In contrast, the young of the land crocs needed warm surroundings to develop. If the climate cooled too much, entire clutches of eggs could fail to hatch. Competition also grew sharper. Early mammals, once small and cautious, evolved into a variety of predators with complex hunting strategies. Some used endurance to tire prey. Others used intelligence to ambush from coordinated angles. Still others climbed, dug, or leaped in ways no reptile could match. With each passing generation, their senses refined, their brains grew more complex, their adaptability widened. The land crocs, though skilled and powerful, carried ancient bodies that changed far more slowly. Their strengths remained consistent, but consistent strengths cannot always match rapidly shifting challenges. As continents drifted and land bridges formed, new mammals entered regions that had once been isolated strongholds for the land crocs. South America, once an island of unusual predators, eventually connected to North America. This event brought waves of advanced carnivorous mammals into territories where Sebecids had once ruled with little opposition. The newcomers arrived with endurance hunting, sharp senses, and the ability to thrive in cooler climates. Fossils show that soon after these mammals reached South America, the diversity of land crocs began to decline. The disappearance was not sudden. It was a slow fading, a long goodbye stretched across many millennia. Climate cooled a little more. Forests shifted. Prey animals changed their habits. Mammalian predators advanced. Generation after generation, the balance tipped away from reptilian hunters. Yet even as their era, as land apex predators faded, Their lineage endured in other forms. Rivers and swamps continued to support crocodilians that adapted to semi-aquatic lives. Protected by water and guided by instincts that had served them for ages, these descendants survived long after their land-running cousins vanished. In the story of why the land crocs did not take over the entire planet, we see no single cause and no dramatic ending. Instead, we see the gentle shaping hand of Earth itself. Climate, food, and competition formed a quiet trio of forces that slowly guided life into new patterns. The land crocs shone brightly for a time, then softened into the background as other creatures rose to prominence, and the world continued its slow turning, carrying their memory in the stones beneath our feet. As we move farther into the story of these land-running crocs, the world around them begins to shift in ways that are subtle at first, then undeniable. Warmth that once wrapped the continents in gentle abundance starts to loosen its hold. The climate that supported towering forests, sprawling wetlands, and comfortable nights slowly drifts toward a cooler rhythm. The earth, always turning and changing, begins to slip into a new era. During the late Eocene, long before humans would ever walk across grassy plains or gaze up at unfamiliar stars, the planet entered a period of gradual cooling. It did not happen in a sudden wave. There were no single catastrophic events like the one that ended the dinosaurs. Instead, the change came softly, almost quietly, as if the earth were exhaling a long breath. Oceans cooled by a few degrees. Ice began to form in distant polar regions where none had lingered before. Seasonal patterns shifted. Rain fell differently. Winds changed their paths. For creatures so closely tied to warmth, even small changes mattered. The land crocs, with their upright legs and slicing jaws, had ruled during times when heat filled the soil and air. Their bodies relied on that warmth. Muscles worked best under a sun that stayed strong year-round. Digestion, recovery, and movement all depended on steady temperatures. When mornings grew colder and nights grew longer, they faced challenges that had no simple answers written into their ancient instincts. The forests that had once sheltered them began to thin in places. Trees that thrived in warm climates struggled as cooler seasons arrived. In their place, patches of grassland expanded. Rivers shifted courses as rainfall patterns changed. Wetlands that supported countless species began to shrink, replaced by drier stretches of ground. These changes were not uniform. Some regions remained lush for a long time. Others changed more quickly. But across the continents, a slow reorganization was underway. For the land crocs, shrinking habitats meant fewer places where warmth collected. Areas once ideal for nesting became unpredictable. Soil that had been moist and warm enough for eggs began to cool too quickly. Young reptiles, so vulnerable in their earliest days, needed stable temperatures to develop properly. A slight drop could slow their growth inside the egg. A larger drop could mean entire nests failed. Food also changed. Prey animals adapted to cooler climates by shifting their ranges or changing their habits. Mammals, with their warm-blooded metabolisms, grew more confident in the cooler air. They could travel longer distances and remain active when reptiles had to remain still to save energy. This difference gradually tipped the balance. Mammals could chase prey in early morning chill or forage through cold nights. Land crocs had to wait for the sun's warmth, losing precious hours of activity. Prey that once moved slowly in warm air now moved quickly in cooler winds, making hunts more difficult. As grasslands spread, open areas replaced dense vegetation. For mammals, this was a gift. Their eyes and legs adjusted easily to open landscapes. Their endurance allowed them to run across wide areas in search of food. For the land crocs, open landscapes offered fewer places to hide or surprise prey. Their ambush strategies worked best in forests or near thick vegetation. In open grasslands, they were more visible. Prey animals could spot them earlier. That extra moment of warning often made the difference between a successful hunt and an exhausting chase that ended with nothing gained. Fossil sites from this time reveal a quiet fading. Bones of land crocs become fewer. Their species diversity diminishes. Mammal predators, on the other hand, appear more often. Some were small but clever. Others grew in size and power, taking advantage of climates that allowed them to hunt over longer hours and wider areas. Reptiles as a group struggled with the cooling trend. Their bodies, shaped by millions of years of life in warm climates, could not adapt quickly. Mammals evolved rapidly, changing in size, shape, and behavior in relatively short spans of time. Their young developed inside warm bodies, protected from the outside climate. Reptile eggs relied on the environment. As that environment cooled, fewer young survived to adulthood. Even the land croc's greatest strengths, such as their powerful bites and upright posture, could not fully counter the sweeping changes in climate. Their instincts told them how to hunt in warm forests. Their senses guided them through familiar landscapes, but the landscapes were changing beneath their feet. The world that had once welcomed them began to drift away. By the time the Oligocene dawned, cooling intensified even further. Ice spread more widely in the south. Ocean currents shifted. Global temperatures continued their downward path. The remaining land crocs retreated into areas that still held warmth. But these refuges grew smaller as time passed, like shrinking islands of opportunity in a sea of change. Their decline was not sudden. It was slow and steady, a gentle fading rather than a dramatic fall. Each generation faced slightly harsher conditions than the last. Over millions of years, fewer species remained. Some survived longer than others, clinging to the last warm pockets of forest. But eventually, the world grew too cool for creatures whose bodies depended so deeply on heat, and so the land crocs, once rulers of their time, began to slip into ancient memory. Their bones settled into the earth, waiting for future eyes to find them. Their story did not end in a single moment, but in a long, quiet transition shaped by the steady breath of a cooling earth. As the land-running crocs moved through the quiet decline of the cooling world, their footsteps softened across the soil of ancient South America. The forests that had once held them in warm shelter continued to shrink. The air carried a cooler breath. Prey animals shifted their patterns, and yet, for a time, the crocs endured. They found pockets of warmth, fragments of old forests, places where the sun still gathered in gentle pools across the ground. But the earth was still changing, shaped by forces much larger than climate alone. Deep beneath the oceans, tectonic plates drifted slowly. They pushed continents nearer or pulled them apart. For millions of years, South America had been an island continent, drifting alone like a vast, quiet boat across ancient seas. That isolation had allowed unusual predators to flourish. It had kept the land crocs safe from the rising armies of mammals evolving elsewhere. While other continents traded species through land bridges and shallow seas, South America held its own secrets for a long time. Eventually, that isolation began to fade. The slow movement of Earth's crust brought North and South America closer together. At first, only shallow regions rose from the sea. Then small islands formed. Over long stretches of time, those islands expanded and merged. And finally, a continuous bridge connected the continents. This event, known today through the soft echoes left in rock and fossil, became one of the defining moments in the story of life on Earth. The bridge opened a path for plants and animals to move between the continents. Some moved south, others moved north, Forests shifted, rivers changed course, and predators, shaped by entirely different evolutionary histories, began to meet for the first time. For the land-running crocs, this new connection brought a wave of challengers that had never existed in South America before. Mammalian predators from the north arrived in a steady flow. Some were large and powerful, with long legs built for running. Others carried keen senses sharpened by generations of hunting across wide, open landscapes. Their warm-blooded bodies allowed them to remain active through cool nights and early mornings. Their young matured quickly and learned fast. These mammals were not like the earlier, quieter carnivores of South America. They were faster, more adaptable, more persistent. The land crocs, shaped by a world of warmth, found themselves facing rivals that could outrun them, outlast them, and thrive in climates that no longer favored reptiles. Fossil sites reveal the quiet evidence of this shift. Bones of North American predators appear in layers that coincide with declining numbers of land crocs. Some fossils show bite marks from these mammals, pressed into the bones of prey species that the crocs once hunted alone. It was not a sudden invasion, it was a slow arrival, followed by an even slower change in balance. At the same time, the world continued its cooling path. The late Oligocene climate pushed temperatures downward even further. Grasslands replaced forests across wide areas. Rivers dried or carved new paths through shifting ground. For mammals, with their internal warmth and adaptable bodies, these changes offered new opportunities. For reptiles dependent on sun and stable heat, each shift made life more difficult. Environmental stress deepened. Nesting grounds that had been reliable for countless generations became unpredictable. Cooled soil slowed the development of eggs. In some regions, nests may have failed year after year. Young crocs that did survive faced landscapes where prey was less abundant. In these conditions, even small disadvantages could echo across entire populations. The combination of new predators, shrinking habitats, and cooling climates began to close the final chapter of the land croc's long story. Some species disappeared quietly, leaving only fragments of bone behind. Others held on a little longer, finding refuge in the last warm places. But each passing century carried them closer to the edge of their time. The arrival of advanced carnivorous mammals placed pressure on them from above. The cooling earth placed pressure on them from below, and the shifting environment that had once offered sanctuary now moved in directions they could no longer follow. Eventually, the lineage that had risen so boldly after the extinction of the dinosaurs faded from the land. Their final footprints were covered by wind and soil. Their voices, whatever sounds they once used to claim territory or call to mates, fell silent. Their reign, long and remarkable, slipped into memory. Yet their story did not disappear entirely. The rivers and swamps of the world still carried descendants of their ancient family. Modern crocodiles, quieter and more specialized, continued to survive in the watery margins of Earth. Through them, the legacy of the land crocs remains, a legacy of resilience, a legacy of adaptation, a legacy of creatures that stepped onto land in the absence of dinosaurs and held their place as rulers through warmth, strength, and time itself. In the deep earth, their bones still rest. They are the final whispers of an age when reptiles once again walked tall across the continents, ruling the land until the world gently turned the page. As the ancient world continued to cool and shift, and as mammals rose to fill roles once held by reptiles, the land-running crocs faded from the wide open landscapes they once dominated. Their footsteps softened until they disappeared entirely from the forests and grasslands of the changing earth. Yet their story did not close with their final breath. Evolution rarely brings endings without also offering quiet continuations. Within the great lineage of crocodylomorphs, some branches vanished, while others endured by reshaping themselves to fit new rhythms of life. If we trace their family tree gently forward from the fading days of the Eocene and Oligocene, we find that certain lineages continued to survive in pockets of warmth and water. These survivors were not the tall, long-legged runners that once chased mammals across forest floors. They were the semi-aquatic forms, the ancestors of the crocodiles, alligators, and gharials we know today. Their bodies were lower to the ground. Their limbs were shorter. Their eyes and nostrils were arranged for a life spent watching from just beneath the surface of calm rivers. These survivors carried ancient traits that helped them weather the shifting climate. As the earth cooled, water remained a more stable refuge than land. Rivers and lakes held warmth longer than exposed soil. Wetlands absorbed temperature changes more slowly. A reptile whose life relied on the sun found comfort in environments where water acted like a shield against the cold. The semi-aquatic crocs could slip into slow-moving streams at night, letting the water cradle their bodies while saving warmth gathered during the day. Their hunting strategies also matched the New World more gently than the strategies of their land-running cousins. Instead of chasing swift mammals across open ground, they relied on patience. They waited below the surface, still and calm, until fish, birds, or mammals approached the water's edge. Their jaws, shaped for gripping rather than slicing, allowed them to hold slippery prey firmly. This method required less constant movement. It demanded less energy, which became crucial as the world cooled and growing seasons shortened. Evolution favored the forms that conserved energy, used water as shelter, and depended on strategies that remained effective even when days grew cooler and nights stretched longer. The land crocs, for all their strength and agility, relied on heat to fuel their bursts of speed. Without steady warmth, their bodies slowed. Their prey slipped away. Their nesting success fell. In contrast, the semi-aquatic forms needed less from the environment and asked the water to help them carry their weight through difficult times. Some early semi-aquatic species moved into habitats where competition from mammals was weaker. Many mammals did not hunt well in water. They struggled to outmaneuver reptiles that could glide quietly beneath the surface. This gave the surviving croc lineages pockets of safety where they could continue to thrive. Over millions of years, these pockets expanded and stretched into new regions. Their descendants spread into different continents, each adapting to local conditions. One lineage adapted to slow, murky rivers and grew long and narrow snouts for catching fish. Another adapted to broad, calm wetlands and developed wide, powerful jaws suited for larger prey. Another settled into warm streams and swamps, allowing smaller forms to persist by avoiding competition with larger cousins. Through this quiet diversification, the modern crocodilians emerged, carrying the echo of ancient resilience shaped by deep evolutionary pressures. The reason only semi-aquatic forms remain today reflects the gentle but relentless force of natural selection. Water stabilizes, it protects, it stores heat, it slows down change. In an age when the planet was becoming less hospitable for reptiles, the water offered a refuge that the land could no longer provide. Every trait that helped an animal make better use of this refuge was passed on. Traits that depended on warm land declined. In this way, the environment sculpted the lineage subtly but deeply. The shift from land to water as a primary shelter reveals how evolution often favors flexibility over raw strength. The land crocs were among the most formidable predators of their time, yet power alone could not shield them from cooling climates or competition with mammals that adapted more quickly. The semi-aquatic forms, smaller in number and less dramatic in appearance, became the true survivors because their lifestyles placed fewer demands on the world around them. As time passed, even these survivors faced challenges. There were periods when crocodilian diversity dropped sharply. There were moments when only a few species remained, but their bond with water and their energy-efficient bodies helped them persist through periods that erased other ancient lineages entirely. Today, when we see a crocodile drifting silently through a river or basking on the muddy edge of a swamp, we are witnessing a story that stretches back more than 200 million years. The creature before us carries the memory of ancestors that walked upright, chased prey across ancient forests, and faced the cool breath of a changing world. They are not relics of a stagnant past. They are survivors shaped by patience, adaptation, and the quiet power of water. What survived and what did not tells us much about the pressures of life on Earth. The land crocs vanished because their bodies asked too much of a world that was slowly changing. The semi-aquatic crocs survived because they asked less. They fit themselves into spaces where time moved more gently. They found stability where land faltered, and so their story continues, written in the ripples of river water and the steady gaze of eyes that have watched the world change again and again. As we move gently from the distant past into the world we know today, the echo of the land-running crocs becomes softer, but it never disappears entirely. Their story lingers in the bodies and behaviors of the crocodiles, alligators, and gharials that glide through present-day rivers. These modern crocs carry a quiet, ancient presence. When we watch one rest on a muddy bank, or float with only its eyes above still water, we are seeing more than an animal of today. We are seeing a survivor shaped by hundreds of millions of years, a relic of a world that no longer exists, yet somehow still flows within them. Many of the traits we see in modern crocs are gifts from their deep ancestry. Their skulls, for example, still carry arrangements of bones found in some of the earliest crocodylomorphs. The flat, elongated snout, the strong jaw hinge, the broad skull roof that shelters delicate sensory organs, all reflect a blueprint written long before human memory. Their eyes remain placed high on flat, the head, an arrangement that once allowed ancient relatives to watch quietly from water or tall grasses. The modern croc's stance, though lower than that of their land-running cousins, still hints at the semi-erect posture shared by early members of their lineage. When a crocodile lifts itself onto land, its body rises just enough to echo the shape of its ancestors, even if only for a moment. Their teeth, too, continue this ancient pattern. They are conical, strong, and suited for gripping prey, much like the teeth found in many fossil crocodylomorphs. The bite they deliver is not simply powerful, it is deeply rooted in time. The muscles that close the jaws of a modern crocodile wrap across the skull in a pattern that has changed little since the Mesozoic. It is a bite meant for holding and pulling, not slicing, a reminder of their long history as ambush hunters. Yet alongside these ancient traits are clear signs of specialization. Modern crocs no longer roam forests and open plains on long legs. Their limbs, shorter and stronger, are adapted for life at the water's edge. Instead of chasing down prey across uneven ground, they rely on stealth and patience. Their bodies flattened slightly over time, becoming more streamlined for drifting through rivers. Their skin thickened, forming armor that helps regulate temperature and protect against threats. Even their hearts, more efficient than those of many other reptiles, reflect a focus on conserving energy during long periods of waiting. Their senses also adapted to their watery lifestyle. While the land-running crocs once depended heavily on vision for pursuit, The modern forms use an intricate network of pressure-sensitive pits around their jaws to detect subtle ripples in water. These tiny organs turn darkness or murky currents into something that can be read almost like sound. A splash, the faint flick of a fish tail, or the step of a mammal approaching the water becomes a signal easily understood by the Croc's wading body. This specialization also appears in their behavior. Crocodiles today hunt mostly by ambush, allowing prey to come close before striking with sudden force. They conserve energy patiently, sometimes remaining motionless for hours. Their movements in water are gentle and quiet. Their attacks, when they come, are swift and controlled. This balance of stillness and explosive strength is a far cry from the active pursuit style of the land-running crocs, but it proved far more suitable for the changing world. Despite all these differences, modern crocs remain effective predators, perhaps more efficient in their environments than their ancestors ever were. Their ability to wait quietly is a powerful advantage. Prey animals must drink or cross rivers. They must pause at the banks. A crocodile needs only one moment when prey lets down its guard. The grip of their jaws, once evolutionary inheritance, became a perfected tool. Once a croc holds its prey, escape is unlikely. Their bodies also handle long periods without food. They can slow their metabolisms dramatically, allowing them to survive through times of scarcity. This ability gave them resilience through cooling climates and shifting habitats, traits that their land-running relatives lacked. As seasons became unpredictable, the water offered consistency. A croc could retreat beneath the surface, letting cold air pass above while it waited in insulated stillness. Their endurance as a lineage reflects a simple truth about evolution. Survival often favors not the fastest or the strongest, but the most adaptable. Modern crocs, despite their ancient forms, are deeply flexible animals. They live in rivers, swamps, lakes, brackish estuaries, and even saltwater coasts. They adjust their behavior based on temperature, food availability, and season. They can be gentle caretakers of their young, vigilant hunters, or patient watchers of passing time. In their eyes, which lift just above the surface of calm water, we can see the shape of ages long gone. In the sweep of their tail, as they move through their environment, we feel the persistence of a lineage that refused to disappear. Modern crocs may not walk the land on tall legs or chase prey across ancient floodplains, but they remain elegant symbols of endurance. Their bodies hold stories of deep earth, warm ages, shifting worlds, and quiet survival. They are relics not because they are unchanged, but because they carry the memory of the world before ours. They survive because they have learned, again and again, how to let the world shape them, and how to remain themselves within that change. As we continue drifting through this ancient story, the footsteps of the land-running crocs grow softer beneath the layers of time. Their tale began with opportunity, flourished with strength and adaptation, and ended with a quiet fading shaped by forces far larger than any single creature. Yet within that long arc of rise and fall lies a set of gentle lessons, whispered across millions of years, about how life grows, changes, and reshapes itself again and again. After the great extinction that ended the age of dinosaurs, the world entered a moment of openness. Ecosystems that had been stable for countless generations suddenly found themselves without their familiar rulers. The absence of towering predators created wide spaces in the food chain, empty roles waiting to be filled. This was not just emptiness, it was invitation, opportunity, a chance for new forms to rise. The land crocs stepped forward into that open world. They carried bodies shaped by deep ancestry, but they also carried the flexibility to grow into something new. With upright legs, slicing jaws, and sharp senses, they slipped into roles once held by theropods. In doing so, they revealed one of evolution's quiet truths. Life does not remain still in the face of change. It moves into openings the moment they appear. It reshapes itself to match the world as it becomes, not as it once was. This pattern unfolded everywhere in the early Cenozoic. Mammals were growing bolder, birds were expanding into new forms. Plants spread across fresh soils that had been cleared by fire and ash. And in South America, the land crocs took their place as powerful hunters. Their story reminds us that evolution is not a straight line. It is a series of responses, each shaped by the circumstances of the moment. When a giant falls, something smaller steps forward. When a world changes, new talents rise from unexpected places. Yet alongside this opportunity came another truth. The success of one group is always tied to the environment that supports it. Apex predators do not exist in isolation. They depend on the forests or grasslands that anchor their prey. They depend on temperatures that warm their bodies. They depend on rivers that feed the plants, that feed the herbivores, that feed the entire chain of life. For the land crocs, the forests and warm climates of early South America created a perfect stage. Heat allowed their muscles to work efficiently. Dense vegetation offered cover for ambushes. Rivers and lakes supported a diversity of herbivores. Every strength they possessed matched the shape of the world around them. Their rise was not only a result of their adaptability, but of the landscapes that held them. When those landscapes shifted, their reign shifted as well. Slowly cooling climates reduced the warm pockets they needed. Forests transformed into open plains. New mammal predators appeared, carrying bodies designed for endurance and speed. The world that once favored them changed, and in that change, their dominance began to soften. Through their decline, we see another lesson. Apex predators are never guaranteed permanence. They stand at the top of food webs that can change with climate, vegetation, and the movement of continents. Their strength depends not only on their own abilities, but on the stability of the world beneath them. When that stability falters, predators are often among the first to feel the strain. They rely on large territories, on abundant prey, and on ecosystems that remain steady enough to sustain them. As temperatures fell and habitats shifted, the land crocs faced forces no claws or teeth could resist. Their bodies, which once carried them so confidently across warm ground, became less suited to the new world rising around them. Their decline was not sudden or violent. It was slow, shaped by the rhythms of climate and the quiet arrival of new competitors. Their fall teaches us something gentle but profound. Dominance in nature is never final. It is a moment in time, supported by circumstances that can change without warning. The dinosaurs once held the throne. The land crocs rose when the dinosaurs fell. Then they, too, yielded their place as mammals adapted to a cooler world. And even today, no group of animals, no matter how widespread or powerful, holds guaranteed permanence. The story of the land crocs shows how deeply connected life is to the planet itself. Evolution does not grant crowns, it grants possibilities. It responds to temperature, food, geography, and chance. Apex predators rise because conditions allow them to. They fall when those conditions shift beyond what their bodies can answer. Their reign, however mighty, remains a temporary harmony between creature and environment. This long arc of rise and fall does not diminish the power or beauty of their existence. Instead, it highlights the quiet resilience of life. When one form fades, another steps forward. When one lineage reaches its limit, another begins its climb. The land crocs were part of this gentle, endless cycle. They filled a space left open by the past, and when their time was done, they passed that space on. As we leave this chapter behind, their story drifts with us like a soft reminder. The world is never fixed, life is never finished, and every creature that rises, whether reptile, mammal, or bird, does so only as long as the earth's breath allows. As we step quietly from the deep past into the unfolding present, the story of crocodiles carries us forward like a slow and steady current. Their lineage, older than flowers, older than birds, and older than most of the continents in their modern shapes, has weathered the rise and fall of entire worlds. They survived when the dinosaurs did not. They persisted through ice, fire, shifting seas, and changing skies. And now, in our own time, they continue to wait along riverbanks, drifting through warm waters with a patience polished by millions of years. Their future, like the future of all life, is tied gently but firmly to the world around them. Climate, once the quiet background to their survival, is becoming a louder influence again. As temperatures rise across the planet, warmth is returning to places that once grew cooler over long stretches of geological time. For reptiles, warmth is not merely comfort, it shapes their movement, their feeding, their reproduction, and their very rhythms of life. Modern crocodiles depend on stable warmth for laying eggs and raising their young. The temperature inside a nest determines whether hatchlings become male or female. Too much heat or too little can tilt entire generations toward one side. In a warming world, this delicate balance may shift. In some regions, nests already produce mostly males, a sign of how sensitive these animals are to even slight increases in temperature. If climates continue to warm, crocodiles may need to nest in different locations or adapt in subtle ways to protect their young from the extremes. Yet warmth also brings possibilities. Crocodiles thrive best in warm environments. As rivers heat and wetlands expand in certain parts of the world, new habitats may open for them. They may move into areas once too cool for their survival. Already, populations in the northernmost parts of their ranges are pushing slowly into places that remained just beyond their reach for centuries. The future climate may act as both challenge and invitation, shaping their movements with gentle but persistent force. This raises a quiet question. Could crocodiles diversify again? Could a warmer world create opportunities like those that once allowed the land-running crocs of the past to rise? The answer, while uncertain, carries hints of possibility. Evolution unfolds slowly in reptiles, yet given enough time and the right conditions, new forms can emerge. If waterways shift, or if food sources change, crocodiles may adapt to fill new ecological spaces. Their bodies, though ancient in design, hold a flexibility that has served them well through many transitions. We see this in the variety of species that exist today, from the long-snouted gharial that hunts fish with delicate precision to the saltwater crocodile that travels across oceans with strong, confident strokes. If climates warm and habitats expand, some lineages might become more specialized. Others might move farther inland or develop new hunting strategies suited for shifting landscapes. We cannot predict the exact shapes they might take, but we can look back into the past for clues. When warm climates once stretched across ancient South America, crocodylomorphs rose from the water and walked with tall legs, filling roles usually held by mammals. They did not do this because they planned to. They did it because the world allowed it, and their bodies had the potential waiting quietly within. Whether something like that could happen again depends on the landscapes of the distant future. It depends on whether open opportunities appear, whether competitors rise or fall, and whether the world shifts into patterns that reward traits still sleeping within crocodile DNA. The past shows us that crocodiles are capable of surprising forms. They once sprinted across forests. They once dominated as terrestrial hunters. They once adapted to climates far warmer than anything we know today. But the past also shows that evolutionary opportunity appears only when ecosystems open doors. Apex predators rise when the world creates empty space for them, not merely because they possess strength or cleverness. If a future world presents rivers with abundant fish, crocodiles may become more specialized for aquatic hunting. If coastlines change, some species may move farther into brackish or marine environments. If new prey types emerge, feeding strategies may shift. Each change would unfold slowly, shaped by countless generations. Yet the most powerful lesson from the past is that dominance is temporary. Even if crocodiles diversify again, they will do so as part of a world that keeps shifting, not as rulers guaranteed a long reign. As climates warm in some places and grow unpredictable in others, their survival will depend on how well they can adjust to rapid change. Their patience, once a strength, may become a limitation if environments shift faster than they can adapt. Still, there is something deeply grounding about their presence. In a world where many creatures evolve quickly or disappear suddenly, crocodiles remind us of endurance. They are not relics trapped in time. They are ongoing participants in Earth's story, shaped not only by the past but by the future they are quietly moving toward. Whatever changes come, they will face them with the same ancient calm that carried their ancestors through fire, ice, and the rise of new life. Their future remains unwritten, yet deeply connected to the patterns that shaped them long ago. And as long as rivers flow through warm landscapes, the steady eyes of crocodiles will likely continue watching from the water's edge, carrying their lineage forward one quiet generation at a time. Across the long sweep of Earth's history, entire worlds have risen and faded like breaths. Oceans have opened and closed. Forests have stretched across continents, only to wither as climates cooled. Great creatures have ruled with confidence, unaware that their time was only one chapter in a story far larger than themselves. When we look back across these shifting ages, a quiet pattern reveals itself. Dominance is never permanent. Life grows, adapts, flourishes, and eventually yields to something new. The planet is always rearranging its pieces, allowing different forms of life to take the stage, then step away when the world changes around them. In this slow dance of eras, the land-running crocodiles hold a special place. Their reign is not widely remembered, yet it filled a remarkable chapter in the early Cenozoic. After the great thunder of the dinosaurs faded, it was not mammals who immediately rushed into the empty roles left behind. For a time, it was the crocodylomorphs, those quiet heirs of an older lineage who rose with long legs and slicing jaws to guide life's next steps. They shaped food webs, patrolled young forests, chased early mammals through shadowed undergrowth, and left their tooth marks on bones that would someday be uncovered by curious hands. Their story feels almost hidden, like a whispered passage in a vast book, yet it reminds us how astonishingly creative evolution can be. Crocodiles, which we now picture mostly along riverbanks or drifting near the surface of still water, once took on shapes and roles that seem almost unbelievable today. They sprinted across plains. They hunted like wolves. They grew to sizes rivaling the largest predators of previous ages. They adapted with quiet skill to the warmth of young tropical worlds. Their bodies shifted and reinvented themselves in ways that show how adaptable even ancient lineages can be. And then, as climates cooled and continents moved, their era of land dominance gently came to an obsolete end, not through sudden catastrophe, but through slow changes that narrowed their opportunities. Other creatures rose to meet the new world more quickly. Forests thinned, grasslands spread, cold seeped into regions that had once been warm havens. The land crocs, shaped for a different age, gradually stepped away, Their bones remained beneath layers of shifting soil, waiting for the day someone would uncover them and wonder what story they once belonged to. When we look at Earth today, with its rivers carrying the descendants of that ancient lineage, it is easy to see only the present form, the powerful swimmer, the patient ambush hunter, the guardian of nests tucked carefully into warm sand. Yet within these creatures lives a memory of older possibilities. Their ancestors walked on tall limbs and ruled territories far from water. The modern forms may seem specialized and familiar, but they are only the latest verse in a very long poem. This reminds us that the world is full of forgotten stories. For every famous creature we learn about in school, there are countless others whose lives shaped ecosystems in ways we are only beginning to understand. The land crocs are one example among many. They show us that life can take unexpected paths when the world changes. They show us that evolution is not a straight line, but a branching river full of quiet surprises. And they remind us that the Earth we know is only one version of what this planet has been. As you rest here at the end of this journey, let your mind drift for a moment. Imagine the landscapes we have visited. Imagine the warm forests of the early Cenozoic, where tall-legged crocs moved through dappled light. Imagine the thundering steps of Barinasuchus echoing across ancient ground. Imagine the soft calls that once carried across humid plains, low and resonant, telling other hunters that a territory was claimed. These worlds are long gone, yet the traces remain, carried gently into the present through stone, memory, and curiosity. There are many more forgotten worlds waiting beneath our feet, many more stories that time has tucked away in layers of rock and soil, and slowly, patiently, we continue uncovering them, adding new chapters to our understanding of life's vast tapestry. If you choose to stay with me, we can explore them together, one quiet night at a time. If you enjoyed this gentle journey, it would mean a great deal if you could like this video and subscribe. It helps this small corner of calm science reach others who may need it, and if you wish to drift deeper into future stories, you are always welcome here. Now take a slow breath, settle into the stillness around you, and let the echoes of ancient worlds fade softly into the night.